Recording. Got it. Just a second while I'm checking it to make sure it is.
And while you're doing that,
Yep.
Craig, I changed from a 27 to a 24-inch, and I found it a lot easier than I thought it would be.
Well, that's good.
And I
to
think
know.
it's the quality of the screen that makes it so you don't notice it is bad.
Yeah, and I think I can configure like a RAM, 16. I can get that.
Yeah,
but-
the big thing is you're going to have to look at the size of the drives, but it's just, you will be blown away how fast it is. So,
yeah.
so regarding Ventura, obviously if you get a new machine, it'll have Ventura on it, and that's fine. There's a couple guys here that used to work for Apple, and they've really been testing it a lot. And the consensus is the way to do an upgrade, and it's the way I'll be doing it, because there's been some problems. There are some serious warts in Ventura. The way to do it is you need to do a fresh install, a clean install, because the cruft, the stuff from the old operating systems, can create problems. So this is particularly on an M1 or an M2, but more importantly on an Intel. So you should make sure you have at least 2 time machine backups, and you should completely wipe your drive. And how you do that is you do a recovery boot, and Al will be looking up for that. It's Command R. So you reboot your machine with Command R, and then it comes up and says, what do you want to do? And you actually go in and you wipe your drive. That's the first step. You wipe the drive, and then then you're in this recovery boot, and now you don't have any operating system or any data on your machine. So the next thing in that same screen in Command R is install Mac OS, and you install it fresh and run that in, and then you migrate your information in from your one of 2 backups that you have that you made just recently. So that's super important to do it that way. Now, in the case of getting a new machine, no problem, because it's brand new. It's going to work just fine. Ventura is a little different. They're making it more, and it's good and it's bad. They're making it more like what your iPad and your iPhone have. So there's some cohesiveness between everything. But I'm always of the belief, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And I am about to embark on a considerable journey and trip. So if it breaks when you update, I can recommend some people to come out and help you, or I might be able to help remotely, but I'm going to be all over the country and all over the planet in the next till August. So anyway, you've been warned. I always say that, and when I'm going to be doing this presentation coming up, I have a slide that I use where I show cows grazing in a nice green pasture, but their necks are underneath a fence trying to eat the grass, the same grass that's on the other side of the fence. So the grass may look to be greener on the other side of the fence, but remember, at some point you have to mow the lawn and pull the weeds. And so don't be, it's hard these days to not be attracted by shiny new things, but shiny new things don't always mean it's better. Okay. So there are some features in it that are good, but risk reward. So we'll leave that up to you guys. I'm confident that it's working pretty well now. We have held off. I mean, it's been out since September, October. And the indications are that this September, October, when the new version of whatever it is, which we'll find out at the Worldwide Developer Conference, what the next version is called, will pretty much just be a maintenance update to Ventura. They're not getting really ambitious on installing new things. One thing, because since we're going to be talking about photos today, and especially the other big thing is we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. But with photos, you're going to the duplicate removal is built into Ventura, and it allows you to remove duplicates. But the majority of you are running iOS 16 on your phone, and you can do it right from your phone. So, that's not a reason you would have to go to it. So, and I'll ask for questions on that. And Harmon, you had your hand up for quite a while, and go ahead.
Well, my situation is I've got an iMac that's even older than Craig's. It's a late 2012, and been going along with Mojave. And about 10 days ago, I said, okay, well, I'm going to get whatever the most modern I can get, which was Catalina. And yeah, well, so
Catalina's, most people skipped Catalina completely because it was a train wreck.
Well, it's the last possible newest version that this particular computer can take. And
Right.
Obviously it was a mistake. And I used Time Machine to go back to Mojave with the command R that you were just describing. And
Right,
then,
which Al posted in the chat.
yeah, and I corrected my mistake. So until I get the new M1 or M2 iMac, I managed to escape from Catalina.
Good. Yeah, but yeah, the island. You felt abandoned on the island.
Hey,
It was
Ken,
only a 3-hour tour.
hey, Ken, somebody asked if there is closed captioning, and I think that should be addressed. They
We
may
can
have-
we can address it in the board meeting. It's on the replay on YouTube, you can turn on closed captioning.
That's probably
possibly
what they
not-
needed to know.
Possibly on live if you went to YouTube Live. I don't know if we have the ability to do it here. Somebody that could do some checking on that. Let's see.
Yeah, it was in the chat. That's
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I know in YouTube, but I think there is some capability, but I can't hunt for it right now. So, but somebody else could. Let's see here. Let me look at one thing that might. No, it used to be able to come on because on the it pretty much does the chat, but I don't. Let's see here. No. Any other questions just generically before we go forward? So today is a mixed bag. And it's photos and ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. And I could fill the entire time with one or the other. I want to split it, but I'd like to get a show of hands, and you can do it digitally or physically because not everybody has their camera on. But who would prefer to go over ChatGPT and artificial intelligence first rather than photos? So let's see. Okay, I think I've got most. Okay, let's lower our hands then. And Al and Tracy. Okay, Barbara, is yours a question or your hand still up? I'll lower it for right now. Okay, so let's see a show of hands who wants to go over photos first. It looks like it's a slight, yeah, I think it's it's almost 50% more wanted to go with ChatGPT first.
You could
So
ask
we'll
a
do
third
that.
category, Ken.
What, not to do anything at all?
Well, no, that it doesn't matter to us which you do first,
Oh, okay. All right.
because I vote on that one.
All right. And Randy does too. So let's do, and it's just because of the way I do the slides and stuff. So I'll go through, and Al, it's the same links I had sent you before for the general meeting, but I'm going to go in much more detail now on it. So you guys, because we have this long format, please, as we go along, don't hold questions. Let's address them as we go along. Go with it, because other people are probably wanting to know answers to the same questions. And this is a bit esoteric, and it's new and cutting edge, and it's changing daily, which is really amazing. So I'm going to share my screen. So the photos one will be primarily hands-on, and we'll be doing that live. But then this is, most of it's driven by slides. And then at the end, I will go in and we'll do some live chat GPTs, and then Al will give you some links at that time. No need to go into it yet. So again, either raise your hand. I have a couple co-hosts that can keep me abreast if there are questions, and you can unmute yourself and go from there. So I'm going to share my screen here and get into the keynote. And yes, we're already recording, so we'll skip that for right now. All right, so ChatGPT. What is it? How to use it? We'll do the hands-on at the end on how to use it, and it's really amazing. ChatGPT is a way to do. It's kind of like searching Google, but on steroids. And I'm going to go in, and mainly the important part is, where did it start? How has it gone? And where is it heading? Should you be worried, or should you just embrace it and go from there? So one sec here, I've got to move the people over here. All righty. So ChatGPT started, ChatGPT, oh gosh, okay, go back one there. Elon Musk and Sam Altman and a few others started, I don't want to say a company, it was a not-for-profit that is called OpenAI. AI, in all the vernacular we're going to be using, stands for artificial intelligence. So what is artificial intelligence? I'm going to tell you about the history, but artificial intelligence means a thinking machine, artificial meaning being man-made. So rather than we have our own inert, and we have multiple levels of intelligence, it's the machine intelligence. The machine is actually thinking. And a lot of this harkens back to think about HAL in 2001: A Space Odyssey. This was forecast a long time ago, and it's the scary thing is, if the machine gets smart and learns, can it take over? Well, remember, most machines have plugs you can unplug, as long as the robot doesn't come and keep you from doing it. But OpenAI was started by them, and it was designed to be a not-for-profit, altruistic, artificial intelligence platform. And the idea was, and Sam Altman and Elon Musk and some of the others that were involved early in really wanted it to be the repository where everyone could get together and share their ideas, because it's like crowdsourcing, but on a super high level, because it's a bunch of genius individuals that are very good at artificial intelligence. And then further from that, machine learning, which I'm going to go to. I try to de-geekify everything. So as I go along, I'm going to teach you what these other terms mean. But artificial intelligence is that. But OpenAI, more recently, it's been forked out. Microsoft got into it a little bit early, but they're now using OpenAI and they're starting their own, they're starting to try profit from it, where it's forking off, and it's not what the original people on OpenAI had intended. It was designed to be open and available to everyone, and a not-for-profit. Doesn't mean it would be free, just not for profit. Everything was designed to just satisfy its own costs. So that's kind of happening. It's kind of splitting. Elon Musk, in fact, is looking at splitting it off and putting it under the Tesla umbrella, because the full self-driving in our cars uses artificial intelligence. But secondly, Tesla is developing a very powerful modular computer called Dojo. And the Dojo computer can work with artificial intelligence dramatically. No longer do we have the big supercomputers like in the old days, a Cray computer that was one big giant computer. Now the thing is, you take a bunch of computers and you can mesh them together. And it's just like crowdsourcing. When we get in a group, we can come up with better ideas. Or if you have 12 people on a tug of war, 12 people will always beat 2 people on a tug of war, because you've got 12 people pulling together. These smaller computers that can be meshed together and create larger computers, they're modular. So that's where they're going with that. So ChatGPT, and I'll give you what GPT means in a minute because it's better on a slide, is just the way to interact, and it's growing dramatically. But basically, it's a way to, in normal language, the English language for now, it will expand out into other languages, but predominantly it's ask it a question in English and it will give you a response in English. Now, once it's done in English, and then let's say, what about if it's if you want it in Farsi, or if you want it in French? Well, that's going to be really easy, because the machines are smart enough that they can do the translations for you. So, but the basis of it is in English, because that's kind of the generic language, and that's where it's all starting. So, deciphering the new artificial intelligence. Now, new meaning it's a lot different and it changes daily. And we'll get into the details of that. So is it free? Many are free. There are different variations, and they're generically called ChatGPT. ChatGPT is like saying a browser or a word processor. You know, you have different versions of word processors. Back in the old days, you had Word. We have Text Edit. We have Pages. Word Perfect is what I meant to say. We have Word. We have Pages, things like that. So it's a different way. Each one is different, but it's generically called ChatGPT. There are 3 main players right now. On the left is OpenAI. Google has Bard, and Microsoft has Bing. And those, even Bing's obviously a search engine, but it's a chat GPT engine too. The differences between them, I mean, this is all kind of geeky and doesn't really mean a lot, but there is. Now, some of them charge because computer time takes a lot, but some of them just limit the amount of searches you could do in a 24-hour period, because you can understand it. All of the servers are being overwhelmed because everybody is playing with this and trying to say, oh, wow, I want to do this. I want to have it tell me what movie I should see and things like that. Now, speaking of that, ChatGPT, unlike using Google search, is not the best for finding current events, because it's using information it's pulled in for a long time and not necessarily what happened yesterday. So don't look at it like that. It is not a news source, okay? It is it's older than that, things a month or even a year or a year older than that. Don't look at it for current events, okay? That's why you have Twitter for that, you have news feeds, you have things like that. It is not for up-to-date information, because the information has to come in, the computers have to digest it and learn what to do with it. So this is how meetings are going to be in the future. There's, they're going to show up and you're just going to have a meeting with ChatGPT and it'll tell you what to do, which might be better than typical board meetings, or we could call it a BARD meeting, so to speak. So you've probably all read about or heard about, the big thing now is people are making papers for school, for whether it be high school or whether it be college, and they're having ChatGPT write the paper for them. Well, ChatGPT and artificial intelligence to the rescue, because now they're making it so that the ChatGPT can check that to see if it was written by one of the other versions of ChatGPT. So these kids thought they could get away with it. Well, in fact, now they can test it, and that's good. And what ChatGPT does, and you'll see some examples that I have, it is, you ask it a question and it will basically take all the information on the internet from everywhere, not from certain places, and it comes back and gives you an answer or writes it for you. So me talking about ChatGPT, which we'll get into more later, is really putting the cart before the horse, because the basis of all of this is artificial intelligence, or AI. Now, AI has a long history, but in all the history of AI, it's in weeks and months, it's doing so much more, and it's doing more all the time. It's expanding on an exponential scale, and I'll get into that. So in the 50s, the first AI, and it wasn't called AI then, was introduced by mathematician and computer scientist Alan Turing. Alan Turing is brilliant. I'm sorry, I think he was brilliant. I think he's passed. I'm not sure. But he started what's called the Turing test, because the idea is, if a computer gets smart enough, how can you tell if you're communicating with a computer or a real person? Well, back in the 50s, that was pretty easy. Obviously, the computer voices weren't really there, and it would not put in tonation and speak in ways or type in ways that would help. You could differentiate quite easy. But they had what was called the Turing test, and a Turing test was a way, and it was developed by Alan Turing to determine, hey, are you talking to a computer or not? We've all been to websites where they have a CAPTCHA, where they say, okay, show me every picture here that has an apple in it. And the idea is in the past, computers couldn't differentiate if this picture had an apple or an orange or whatever in it. So only a human could say that. And then you say, I'm not a robot. The reason those websites have those is because, let's say it's a website where you're signing up for something, or you're trying to get they had the big thing with the Taylor Swift tickets. Well, these bots, or which are robots, these computers would go in and they're going to try game the system. They're going to try get those tickets before anybody else, and they can try 100 times in the same time you would sign in and do it. So the idea is that they want to eliminate bots. They want to know you're human, so that it's fair for everybody. We've gotten to a point now where the computers, they can circumvent all of that. Just for a quick little aside, there was a neat thing years ago Google did. You know how sometimes you get these CAPTCHAs, and the CAPTCHAs are letters and numbers, but they're all askew and they look really weird. And those I find really hard to do, let alone a computer couldn't decipher it. But anyway, it's bad enough humans can't decipher it. But there was a thing that Google did for their CAPTCHAs is Google was in the process of scanning any book that was out of copyright to scan all the books that had existed since the beginning of time. Well, they're using scanners, and we all know that sometimes scanners can't pick up some words very well because the ink may be a little bit blurred, or two letters go together, they can't tell what it is. So the computer couldn't tell that. So what it would do, when you would go to this Google site and do a CAPTCHA, there would be a word you could really see, like let's say the word bird. But over here on the other side, there would be a word that, let's say the word cabin, for instance, and the A and the B were kind of meshed together. Well, the computer scanner couldn't figure out that it was an A and a B. It just looked like, I don't know. But we, with our eyes and our cognitive ability, were able to make out that it's an A and a B. So what it actually did is, when enough people said, oh, that's the word cabin for your CAPTCHA, it sent that information back to Google, and Google was then able to introduce that back into the book. So the word cabin showed up correctly in the book that they scanned. It was miraculous, and it was so smart, and it was really cool. So, but that's since gone because the computers are so good at it now because they have such a great amount of work. And let's talk about artificial intelligence for a second, because what is it? Well, it is taking something that's typed or spoken and adapting it. And I'll give you an example. We use dictation a lot of times. So if I'm using dictation to type for me, and I say the word, if I say the sentence or question, will I need a jacket tonight? It would type it out. Well, let's see what happens if I do Siri, which is artificial intelligence. Will I need a jacket tonight?
The low will be 46 degrees Fahrenheit tonight.
So with regular dictation, if I had typed, will I need a jacket tonight, it would have typed that. But I asked Siri, will I need a jacket tonight? So the artificial intelligence assumed I must want to know what the temperature will be. And it gives me the weather. And hey, that's pretty cool, actually. So that's in simplicity what artificial intelligence is. Well, you got to remember, we're talking about it started in the 1950s. And these are all things that were happening in the 1950s. I Love Lucy, the beginning of civil rights, the Rosa Parks thing happened in the 50s. The Cold War and the Korean War, the rise of Elvis, Sputnik, the first satellite was launched. And ironically, just after this week, this is when Queen Elizabeth was ascended to the throne. So the 1950s, that's a long time ago. It's pretty amazing that that's when artificial intelligence started. Then in 1956 is when they first called it artificial intelligence. And that was at Dartmouth. And it was the birth. Remember, Alan Turing kind of started it, and he had a whole lab. He was in England, and they just had a lot of brains there working on it. Remember, it wasn't too long after World War II. So it was all the people in England that had worked on the breaking the Enigma machine and things like that. So those scientists started AI. And so in 1956, at this Dartmouth conference, the term was artificial intelligence, and that's what they called it. It wasn't until decades later they started calling it AI. Well, in 1956, something else happened of great importance to me is I was born. 1956. And that puts it in perspective. At 67 years old, they were doing this 67 years ago. That's me in the center holding the flowers, and I don't look like I'm too happy about it, but it's my mom and my brother. So, oh, and actually AI will be able to fix this photo. That's a scan of a photo, and the photo had like a texture to it. It was really weird. So in the 50s and 60s, it focused on symbolic reasoning and problem solving. So in other words, it was really more like crunching numbers, and you could throw things at it. And remember, so there's a difference between a programmer programming a computer. So you can tell it to do calculations. You can say, you teach it. In fact, you would have mathematics tables. Remember memorizing the calculation tables of the times tables and things like that. Well, the computer had that table. And so if you said 1 + 3, well, it didn't necessarily calculate it as much as it looked it up. What AI is starting to do is telling the computer, teaching it how to learn from other things. In other words, teaching it how to solve the problem rather than look it up on a table. Because the early computers were simply that. You take an adding machine. An adding machine is simply taking a connection and adding it through, rather than actually going through and saying, well, if it's plus this or minus this, doing it that way. So AI is teaching the computer more or less how to learn, but that comes up later in machine learning. So in the 60s and 70s, it went from coding the computer to use AI to actually kind of using natural language for its output and its input. No longer was it all written in code or script. It was being able to kind of throw things at the computer and it would get it back to you in normal, natural language. And that's pretty sophisticated in itself, because, you know, when we look at a sentence, it's a bunch of letters, and the way those letters form words, and then how those words form sentences, has different meanings no matter how you do it. Because we just have the letters of the alphabet, and it can be interpreted in so many different ways. So in fact, that shows up when you have bad translations. You know how sometimes if you have something, it does a literal translation to another language, and it kind of puts it out of context. And so therefore it can mean something totally different. The words are translated correctly, but the context and the way the words are in there makes all the difference in the meaning. So then the focus shifted to machine learning. Now, they've been kind of getting into this, but, well, and in here to geekify it, anytime you hear about algorithms are just recipes, okay? An algorithm is, you know, you mix eggs and flour and water and you come up with bread, right? So it's a recipe. An algorithm is a recipe of what happens. But you can change algorithms. But up to this point, again, they were programming the computer. In the 80s, they were starting to draw a map, so to speak, what they call decision trees. Those are essentially a flow chart. A flow chart of here's where we want to, here's where we are, here's our choices along the way, and here's where we want to end up. I look at that like you've all used Google or Apple Maps, and it comes up with 3 ways to get to a certain destination. And it can give you the fastest, it can give you the way without tolls, and it can give you a way that avoids highways. All of those things are on there. And those are decision trees. That's a flow chart. You have your location and you have your ultimate destination, and it gives you choices along the way. And that's really what a computer is doing when it develops these algorithms. And again, it's like recipes. So machine learning is, it focuses on those algorithm and recipes, but it learns patterns. In fact, let's say we'll use the map situation I just said. Let's say if when you program it in and the machine comes back and says, here's how you can get there. Well, let's say you always choose to go to a way where you avoid a freeway, for instance. You're avoiding freeways. Well, it would learn then to only give you results avoiding freeways or avoiding toll roads or things like that. Or if you always go for the fastest, it'll learn that's what you want. So that's what machine learning does, is the programmer doesn't say, hey, I want to always go the fastest. What it is it puts in there, you put in your destination, it calculates it. And if you're always choosing the fastest, the machine learns that you want to go there the fastest way. So again, that's pretty amazing, and that's very simplistic, but it's making the decision for you, and it's learning from other decisions. Or the big thing is, it learns from the data it creates, and it can go deeper and deeper and deeper. We'll show you an example of that when we go to this itinerary page that's coming up. So this is the part that scares people, and rightly so. And that's why OpenAI was just such a big deal about trying to make it altruistic and have controls, because it's the computers are so much faster than us. We problem solve, and we do intelligence up to this point better than a computer. But with the power of the computer and the speed of the computer, in fact, the perfect example is look at chess playing now. The computers, it was a big deal when IBM Big Blue, I believe it was Kasparov, whoever it would know, it was, who was the Russian or the American chess player, Bobby Fischer. When he played the computer and the computer beat him, that was a big deal. And it was the machine deciding what moves to make, because whatever Bobby Fischer move would make, the computer had to go through it and look at, well, if this does this, what are the other scenarios? And it was a big deal when the computer beat Bobby Fischer. Now the computers are so much farther than that, and it's just not even fair, because they're so quick and they go through every scenario and they come back with what's the best one. But remember, when the person makes another move, then that scenario changes completely. So it's machine learning where the machine learns itself. I'll give you an example. For instance, my Tesla now has full self-driving, and I took someone to the airport a few days ago, and right in front of their house, I activated it, and it took me to the terminal I had in the navigation system without me intervening at all, completely. And the way that the machine has learned that. So let's look at that situation for a second. So I'm on a street, first of all, in where I live, there's no lines in the little streets. The car just needs to go and kind of by the curbs and things. It's not actually using the GPS to drive. It's only using that for navigation. It uses the cameras. So it comes up to a stop sign, and the computer in the car says, well, there's a red octagonal sign that says the word stop. It knows that's a stop sign. But let's think about it for a second. Let's say a delivery truck or a moving van had clipped the edge of that sign, and one side of the sign was folded over. It's no longer an octagon. So at some point, someone went to that intersection and the car didn't stop automatically. So the person or the car submits this thing and it says, wow, you know, there was a problem here. So in the early days of autopilot or full self-driving, there were a bunch of people, a bunch of coders in a room, and they would look at the video of this exception and say, oh, well, that's a bent sign. So they made an exception that says, if you encounter a sign like this, treat it like a stop sign. It's gotten to be so much data and the computers are getting so good that no longer, in fact, Tesla let go of all those people that were doing it by hand. That was called, by the way, that was called labeling. Let's say you got to a road sign that was different than one they've ever seen. Well, that comes up and they have to say, well, that's this. People had to interpret it. The machines now have so much capability that they have so much capability that they're doing this and comparing it to other ones, and they're learning that this bent octagon sign is now a stop sign. So the machine is doing this labeling, and that's the hardest thing because, you know, you have all these edge cases. I did another drive just a couple of days ago. I have a client up above Auburn in Todd Valley, actually not too far from where Keith McMahon is, just past him on there. Keith can appreciate this. I had, in the entire trip from my house to there, I had to intervene twice. Once was as I got off Highway 80 to turn right on Auburn Forest Hill Road. There's a weird intersection there, and there were already some cars there, and it was not going to get into it would have gotten to the right lane or the correct lane to go through, but there were cars there in the way, so I intervened. And then farther up the road, there's a big sweeping right-hand turn on the Auburn Forest Hill Road, but there's also a right-hand turn lane to a 90-degree turn. Well, my car somehow wanted to go into that. It knew it's supposed to be going straight, but it wanted to go into that turn. So I had to intervene there. Other than that, I had no interventions in a 45-minute drive. So it's gotten really, really, really good. Now, what happens is when I intervened on both of those, the thing comes up and I use the microphone and I tell it what was wrong. And then that gets transmitted to Tesla. And obviously it's not somebody there transcribing what I do. It listens to the voice, it transcribes it, it's to the computer does. And the computer learns from that. It sees the video and says, oh, okay, if there's ever a situation like this, let's fix it. And it doesn't send it to my computer, and my car doesn't learn. It's the big computer, the big, huge computer that Tesla has that does this machine learning. So it's amazing. And it is the answer to full self-driving that is getting very, very close these days. So,
and does the car argue with you?
Yeah, and then I cuss at it. It's okay. So no, it actually doesn't. What you do is I have 3 ways to disengage. I can turn the wheel and a certain amount, and it will disengage. I can tap the brake, or I press the disengage button on the thing, and it disengages. So it doesn't, but that's what spurs that thing to come up and say report it. So and it's gotten really smooth. It used to in many times it would be like I used to say it was like a brand new teenage driver. It'd be going around a curve and it would be, you'd see you see and feel the steering wheel going real jerky like that. Now, because of machine learning, it's smoothed out. In fact, I'll tell you 2 of the things that they've done recently. And you guys should, when you're driving along the freeway, you should notice this. The Tesla and most of any of the cars that have autopilot feel like they get closer to big trucks. We called it truck lust. And they don't really get closer, but what it is we have all kind of, without knowing it, go away from trucks when we're going by them. We go farther away. And you can see that because it drew my attention to it. It felt like the car was getting closer, but realistically, the car was staying exactly between the lines when sometimes you don't want it to. So in fact, the newest version now, it goes over and hugs the left line if I'm passing a big truck. It makes you feel better. And if you watch, that's how other people do it. It's pretty amazing. So the truck lust is lessened. The other thing is when we go, let's say it's a curve, just a nice gentle curve. Everyone has a tendency to go towards the inside of the curve. Some people will go over what's called the fog line, or other people just go up to the fog line because you're cutting the curve because it makes it smoother for you. You're not getting as much sideways G's and things. And so what happens is that the computer was saying, no, I have to be exactly between the lines. That's it. No variance. Well, now finally it's going and it goes to the inside a little bit. Within reason, but the computer also had to deal with situations. Let's say you're on a narrow city street and there's cars parked on both sides and then somebody's double parked. Well, if the computer is really strict, it'd just sit there until that double parked car moves. Nope, the full self-driving does a wonderful job of being able to look and see. It pulls out a little bit and sees if there's room to go around, and yes, it'll cross that single or double yellow line to go around and come back in. And it deals with that pretty well. And as it's matured, it deals with it more aggressively. For instance, when I was heading out to Sacramento Airport, it does all the lane changes and everything. But as I was approaching the exits, like for instance, going in Highway 80 and then transitioning to Interstate 5, my car used to get over into the right-hand lane 2 miles ahead of time. And I would always disengage and say, no, come on, it's going to take me forever. Now I get worried about it, that it's not going to get over because it's waiting longer than I would have. And there's actually 3 modes. There's chill, regular, and aggressive. And if I have mine on aggressive, so it will try to get over there. It doesn't cut anybody off, but it in fact waits to merge until kind of the last possible. So it's improving in that regard, and that's all because of machine learning. So this slide is, again, think about the old computer programmers where they would put the code in to do things. I remember in summer of 1973, I took a summer school class at Cordova High School, and it was on computers. Well, the computer we had was the size of a refrigerator, and it just had flashing lights on it. And of course, there were all these switches, and the switch was either on or off, right? It was a 1 or a 0, and there were manual switches. And to quote program this computer, it used a punch tape, not a card. This one used a tape. And I remember that I was trying to decide between 2 different ski brands that I wanted to get for next year. And I had gone through all the ski tests on the 2 magazines that were out there, and they had charts on. It was a K24 competition and a Dynamic VR17. And I put in like what the ski rated itself in speed and in moguls and all these other things. And I compared, there were charts for both. So I could give that a factor of, well, this is important to me, so I want you to weigh how it did higher on this one than the other one. So, and of course, I kind of had a built-in bias on which ski I wanted to do. And sure enough, I put it in. It took basically all these numbers and calculated and told me I should get the VR17, which I kind of knew ahead of time. So there was confirmation bias there. But I just gave it information and it came back and it was essentially a fancy calculator. So with machine learning, though, you give it training data. And what training data would be in this case, like with ChatGPT, is it goes and it finds all the information, not just the pertinent information for what you're doing, but it grabs all the information. Medical things are a perfect example. By the way, ChatGPT has been able to pass the bar, and it is now regarded for medical. Now, the medical is a little weird because I have a lot of friends I ski with. My best friend that I do the great race with is a doctor, and they're just like using Google search, it can help them research everything that's out there, but so much of healthcare revolves around being with the person and listening to what they say, because sometimes symptoms are thrown off a little, but it is a great diagnostic tool because it's based on history. So, but it's still, I mean, that's one thing where it can help a lot. And robots do wonderful surgery better than surgeons, and surgeons use robots because they're very accurate and they don't have as big hands. So anyway, so training data is all the stuff out there. The algorithm, remember, that's the recipe. That's how it treats the data. Then inside the computer is the learning mode. It learns from the recipe and the training data. And so the idea is that, you know, you can tweak recipes. If you know what you're doing, you can tweak a recipe, and you might have a different outcome. Well, it would tweak the recipe of the algorithm and come out with what you're looking for. So then there's the trained model, and then you get the results. And the results can be analyzed, and you don't go back and do the data different because the data is there. That's a known and a non-changing, non-variable quantity. It's just how you do the algorithm, and you can tell the computer, again, it goes back to the learn that I want to go the fastest way every time, not the avoid highways way. So that's where AI is amazing. But coupled with AI is the machine learning. Probabilistic reasoning, in other words, that's the what ifs. And if I do this, and then, more of the people go for the fast route, so let's bias the fast route, things like that. So speech recognition, when you look at how speech recognition has come so much farther, I mean, just look at Siri. Siri is much better than it used to be. All of these speech recognitions are. Look at the translation apps. It's amazing what they can do. They can do real-time translation now. And that is all because the computers have gotten more powerful, and they've been fed the right recipes, and then they digest it, so to speak, and they're coming out with better results. So data mining, computer vision, data mining is where it goes out. For instance, the biggest data mine out there is Facebook. They're mining your data to sell to the advertisers. And that's a bad part of it. So anyway, and data is king, and whoever has the most data can have the best results. So all the data in the world is what happens. So big data, that's a tremendous amount of data. There's so much data out there, and it's hard. You can't hide from having your data harvested. It's harvested all the time. But in recently, there's so much big data, but big data does no good if it's just stored in a warehouse. It's the computers having the ability to process that data and make it make sense and use it for the learning, just like learning the different stop signs, the road signs, so that self-driving gets better. It's the same thing with speech recognition. It's the same thing with doing the translations. I mean, it's just amazing. And when you think about it, the new M1 and M2 Macs are using essentially the same chip that's in the iPhone. It's that same processor, and it's amazingly powerful. And it's quick, It doesn't use a lot of energy, and look at how long the batteries last. So what you have in your hand is tremendous. The extra speed not only just does the processing machine learning, it's able to process you asking it a question in normal language and giving you the answer in normal language. And then, of course, it can translate it into different languages. So neural networks. Neural networks was a phrase that was coined because the ultimate was to make a computer work like the human brain. And we have neurons, we have neural networks, we have pathways. That's been shown too, where sometimes people will get a stroke and part of the brain is compromised. And what happens is there are other pathways in the brain. Let's say it's someone has a problem where they have a stroke and they don't have good use of their left arm anymore. Well, with some not completely, but with some training, the brain can create new pathways around to try and make up for that. Well, that's a neural network. And so the idea is, and we talked about linking a bunch of computers together. Well, that's a neural network. So by having these machines, and the machines these computers don't even have to be in the same room. They can be connected by very high-speed fiber optic networks. They could be in another office. They could be in another country. And so those machines can work together as one, quote, brain, and that's a neural network. So the idea is that these neural networks can shoot things off to other parts of the network to do some, let's say this computer is really good at processing numbers. This other one is good at processing languages. Well, then you've got two computers working with what they do best, working together to have it happen. So neural networks are pretty important in that. If you hear that, that's what it is. And again, look at it like the human brain, because if they can now track the brain and see where neurons are firing and things like that. It's pretty amazing. Well, if you look at a circuit board, it's very much that way. But beyond the circuit board, it's like multiple computers for the neural networks. And again, if there's any questions, speak up. I don't see any hands coming up. So the big thing now is that they're getting so good at this change of teaching the computer how to think that it comes back, and it's an exponential curve now. They're really, really concerned because the computers are beyond the human brain at this point, and the concern is that within the last 2 years, AI has become so good and so efficient that it's learning in leaps and bounds, and the fear of the unknown is, what could it actually do? Now, does it end up being a sentient being? There's been some things showing that there are the ability for it to even not get emotional, but make decisions on its own. And again, it's not, the programmer didn't program in, it's learning from all the information and the data it's gathered, and it's trying to kind of be that. Kathy, you've got a question. Go ahead. Unmute yourself. Kathy Dodson, did you have a question? You're muted.
How's that? Can you hear me?
That's better. Yes.
Okay, thanks. The Turing test you talked about, is if we could tell if something was created by artificial intelligence or not?
No, the original Turing test was not. He started artificial intelligence, but the Turing test and these CAPTCHAs are try to determine whether it's a human or a computer.
Okay. Okay,
And
and
that's probably no longer possible.
that was my question. Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
And
thank you.
is it live or is it Memorex? And we're going to go through some stuff and show you that in a little bit here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the scary thing. But like I said, remember with ChatGPT, if you create something in ChatGPT, it can look great. But now the people at the smart scientists said, well, let's find a way to detect if it's ChatGPT. And you'll understand that in a minute when we do some examples. But the other thing is about ethics and responsibility. Well, when I was giving this presentation to the Apple user group, the whole association up here at Sun City, a question came up is, well, who determines the morals and the ethics? And I turned it back around to her and I said, who determines that in people? And no one does. And it's some people have different morals and ethics than others. And society kind of puts barriers on that. And then, of course, the laws put barriers on that. And it is something. And that's why there's a concern, because for the time being, it's only dispensing information. But at some point, it could determine that, well, judging by this person, maybe they shouldn't be driving anymore. So they send them, they send something to DMV saying that this person's license should be suspended. Things like that. That's not possible at this point. But the problem is, it's hard to unring that bell. If AI continues along this trajectory, because its trajectory is straight up right now. It is amazing how fast it is changing. ChatGPT 3.5 was really good. After about a month, they came out with ChatGPT 4 that was it was appalling how great it was. So it's unknown territory, so we don't know the implications. But it's hard to unring that bell, and it's once the horses have left the barn, it's too late to close the door. So that's the concern. And Elon Musk, love him or hate him, who's a very, very libertarian in his beliefs, says that he's calling for some sort of regulation. And that's amazing, because he's one that doesn't believe in regulation, but that's how much it worries him. And the problem is regulation. I mean, regulation might work. It's kind of like these spam calls we get. They come from outside the country. So yeah, there's laws against spam calls, but hey, they're not coming from within our country. So what can you do about it? And you don't want bad actors or nefarious people, amoralistic people, to use this for bad. It can be great for good, but the problem is, could it be used for bad? And again, look at 2001: A Space Odyssey. So great question, Kathy, too. So are we asleep yet?
Oh no.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good links in the chat there, Ken, for
Al, I've been watching. You're doing great. And these you can dig, and these will all be available afterwards. They'll come out in a PDF, and they'll all be linkable. And then revisit them a month later, and things will have changed. That is how fast it's going. So to de-geekify this too, I want to go into some definition. So GPT stands for, which is crazy, generative pre-trained transformer. In other words, it transforms something. So it was just it's better used as the acronym. Just think of it as Chat GPT. And the chat just means you're chatting with it. it was originally, it said chat bot. So in other words, chat robot. When you hear bot, think of robot. So chatbot GPT is what it started out. And it's just a form of AI. And again, it's using human-like language for input and human-like language for output, because that's great, because you don't have to be a computer scientist. You don't have to know code. In fact, believe it or not, ChatGPT is coding computers. So I don't know if you've ever, I never really did any coding, but I kind of see what it is. When you used to design web pages, you used to have to kind of code it. And the code is in its own language, and there's multiple codes. I mean, you go back to Fortran and COBOL and C, C++, things like that. Those are all programming languages, and the programmer has to know that language, because for a computer to do something, you had to program it to say certain things. And then there's, like, at the end of that one sentence, it would say, if this, then this, and then it would do different loops and different things like that. Well, the thing with programming is it has to be accurate, because a computer until now wouldn't know what you were trying to do. So you had to put it exact. The symbols and everything had to be in the exact spot. Well, now they are programming in C++. You tell ChatGPT what you want the program to do, and it will develop code, and it will be accurate, and it's amazing. The other significant thing to this is this artificial intelligence and the ChatGPT version of it has huge implication in our workplace and our workforce. When the computer can deal with customer service calls better than a customer service representative, and you don't even know that it's ChatGPT, there's going to be less people employed. Most of them are offshore at this point, but there's going to be less people employed doing that. Coders, people building code, people making artwork. I'll show you some examples of that. It really is, it's our trip to the moon. It's the Henry Ford in the assembly line. It's that dramatic on how it will affect society. And a lot of it good, but there's implications with it. So again, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. They want to put some brakes on it. And the other thing it needs is, I call it guardrails. You need to fence this in, because we talked about the moral issues and the ethics issues. What will really be funny is when you have a chatbot talking to another chatbot, and they get in some sort of war of words or something like that. That would be interesting to be a side observer on. So anyway, it's pretty amazing. And that's ChatGPT, generative pre-trained transformer. It's just this natural language. Speaking of that, there's what's called large language modules, LLM. You'll hear that because I'm going to tell you about a podcast the best podcast that there is ever. And he uses AI, and they'll talk about LLM. So LLM means large language modules. And what that means is it's the ability to interact both input and output in normal languages. But what it does is, the reason it can do that so well now is because it went out and it has basically data mined and got all the data that's out there and how people talk. I'll give you a perfect example of this. There's a Canadian, a very intellectual guy. He's a bit different. Some people like him, some people don't like him. But Jordan Peterson, who's very smart, and he wrote a book that had 12 chapters. And he decided as an experiment one day, and he's not a scientist. He's he's not an AI scientist. He's just he's a keen observer, and he has some ideas on things, and some are right, some are wrong, doesn't matter. But he's very erudite. Anyway, he asked ChatGPT to write the 13th chapter of his book, and it referenced the book. So what came back was ChatGPT figured out what the next chapter should be and did it in his writing style and his mannerisms. And he, as the author of the original book, was blown away and said, "Oh my gosh, that's, I couldn't have done it any better." And that's pretty amazing. And again, it does different types. You can give it different impetuses. So it's wild. So this is how the thing works with large learning. It's just basically a feedback loop and different things like that. And it's learning in the computer. Again, it's like teaching a child. You teach them how to learn different things. And look at it this way. You think about a young child. The first time they put their hand on the burner or the hot pot, they learn not to do it again. Nobody had to tell them. You can tell them all you want, but they're still going to do it. Once they do that, boom, they're never going to do it again. That's the machine learning. AGI, you will also hear about. And this whole thing, ChatGPT is, in fact, an artificial general intelligence. That's the further step in AI. Artificial general intelligence is for the machine to learn more and make decisions and learn and learn and learn. And again, in the past, the machines were 2-year-old kids. Now they're college professors and going beyond that. Keith, you had a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. You talked about computers being able to listen to what a lot of people say and interpret what they say and put meaning into it for the response. But a lot of people talk in very different ways that can be complicated to understand. For example, if you're being interrogated at a police station and someone says, "I don't know nothing about no murder," has 3 negatives in it. What does that mean? They don't know anything about the murder, or they know everything about it because there are 3 negatives?
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Say again?
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
No, yeah. So great point. And I'll give you. I can kind of try hit it in 2 different ways. First of all that is data, and so in that case, that's not the norm. So any variance from the norm, just like the octagon sign that's bent, it goes through and it will look at that in context. And if there's enough of that language in a different way, it can gather that information and make the right decisions. But those are the things that'll tweak along the way. Obviously, it's in standard English right now. That's what its most training is. But it will go through, and because it has the capability to learn from the data, all the thing is lacking is a good enough amount of that data. And so it's really, really amazing. So it will do it. I'll give you an example. Back in when we used to have GPSs that were the standalone devices. Remember TomTom? TomTom was the one that, before we had the iPhone and stuff. And I remember the TomTom, and I was really, really amazing because you could speak to it, and it was really bad back then. You had to say, if you couldn't say, "Just take me to 123 Main Street, Sacramento, California," you would have to say, well, it knew you were in California. So then you'd say, Sacramento. And then you'd say Main Street. Then you'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, because that's how it would input it. And it only had to know those things. Well, it took 18 months longer for TomTom to roll out voice recognition in the US than it did in Europe. And the reason it took 18 months longer in the US was because of Southern accents, New York accents, even the 4 different New York accents. And so that's really, it goes to your point, but the computer is so good right now that in fact, the words, it's getting the words, but the thing is that you were right about it's double or triple negatives, and it learns around that. And because it's adaptable, because we can learn around it, and if we can surely learn around it, it can, because it's to the point where it is more capable than our brain. Good point and good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's AGI. Let's see here. And this is just kind of think how it is out in the ether, artificial general intelligence. So here's some other examples of AI. Think of manufacturing robots to this point. A manufacturing robot, let's say it's making a widget. Well, just like Henry Ford's assembly line, you had one individual doing one task. Up to this point, you have one robot doing one task. Well, then you can make it so robots can do 2 tasks because you program it. But robots are getting to the point now, and in fact, they have humanoid robots that are doing things, and it determines how to do it. In other words, if I want to put this piece of paper in this envelope, you just say, put this paper in the envelope, and it determines how to do it. So we're getting there. The self-driving cars, I've told you that. The smart assistants, I gave you an example of with Siri. It's, will I need a jacket tonight? Those are all using artificial intelligence. Healthcare management. So that's not necessarily the doctor giving you the diagnosis, but in fact, many of it is. But think about it this way. Think how beneficial that is. If a doctor prescribes a new medication for you, even though and so now they have a thing where the doctor would prescribe a medication and he puts it in, and boom, if you're taking another medication that it might have effects with, because it's basically querying that database using artificial intelligence, saying, oh, there might be a problem with this. So that's very beneficial in that way. Automated financial investing, ETF funds, exchange traded funds, like many times you can have with your financial, whether it's Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard, you can say, put me in a 2040 fund, something like that. And, you obviously, as you get closer to needing the fund, you get less risky with those investments, but along the way, it does those risk investments. Well, the funds that are doing that, those are all basically computer algorithms saying, okay, we want a risk tolerance of this. And then they find places to place those investments and do the funds that way. That's using machine learning. And that's for us, but they're using that to do all these micro investing and things like that. A virtual travel booking agent. It's really, you can go in now and say, give me a flight to here, but stop over here, and it'll just do it for you. Photo enhancements. This is huge. You can take a photo. I'm going to show you when we go into photos and how it's improved in Apple Photos to basically remove smudges and different things like that. I've got some photos to show you here. And unfortunately, marketing chatbots. It's knowing that if you are a certain age and you're searching for this, and it'll go ahead and do that. But the other one on the marketing chatbots is those little virtual assistants you have that try get you down the right path before they hand you over to a live customer service person. And to be honest, I think the future of customer service and ChatGPT is very, very good, because other than with Apple, most customer service experiences are not the best. Siri, call me a cab. Okay, hi cab. So that's actually, you know, Siri has been, Siri's my girlfriend, but, and she's getting better. She has not integrated ChatGPT yet. But she is there. I say she because the original Siri was she, but Siri uses artificial intelligence. So we talked about manufacturing robots. There's some amazing stuff out there on what robots can do. You tell them now, go point A to point B, and it does it. You've seen the one from Boston Scientific. Those robots go up and down steps, they jump over things, and they're no longer is the guy telling them to jump. They're saying go from here to here, and then it gets around those obstacles. It's amazing. And that's artificial intelligence. We talked about self-driving cars. I mean, my car shows up, and in fact, if there's someone, a pedestrian at an intersection, my car will stop and try to recognize if that person's going or not. And it recognizes blinkers and does all that stuff. In fact, that one of the hardest things for the programming is, let's say you come up on a four-way stop. We all know the rules. First person at the stop goes first. Well, if it's a tie, the person on the right goes first. All these are programmed into the computer, but the big problem with cars and self-driving was, well, yes, okay, that's the rules, but what if the person to the right keeps waiting and waiting and waiting and waits for you? Well, at some point, the car says, okay, I'm just going to go then. Now it's still looking out, and if the other person goes, it'll stop. But those kinds of things are what it needs to deal with. The ability to go over a center line if it needs to go around a car, if that's the only pathway. The other stuff is easy to do. It's all these edge cases that are tough. So here's an example of photo enhancement. Luminar, one of the photo processing apps, does a good job on this. This horse is not artificial, but look at the sky, the difference between the two. This is a replaced sky. The sky on the right is artificially put in there by the program. And believe me, it's one button to do it. It doesn't, you don't have to cut around the mountain. Actually, this is where I was in Iceland, and this is a wonderful shot. I shot from right behind her. This isn't my photo, but this is from there. You see the very bland, boring blue sky on the left side and the reflection. Now look at the sky on the right side and look at the reflection that artificial intelligence created, and it made it so it didn't go over the horse and the rider. So that was done completely artificially. Okay. Now, sky replacement, I actually will never, ever do on any of my photos. I think it's wrong. If I wasn't there and what I saw, nope. But if you think about this guy, if this was an ad and they needed to do it, I don't disagree with people that do it. I just won't do it. If it wasn't, I will never do this guy that wasn't there. I'm just that way. Now, on the other hand, if there was a family on this beach, and I didn't want them on the photo, I would take them off. I don't have a problem with that. If there was a power line in the way, I don't have a problem with that. I'll subtract, but I won't put a fake sky in. I'm just that way. So, and if you choose to, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Everybody's their own.
I might add a point, Ken.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
It's a very good job of cleaning up. You know, in old slides, you'll see.
Well, that's this next
dark
slide.
spots.
Yeah.
Does a really good job on that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And so this is a perfect example. You can barely see it on the left, but if you see on the lower left, you can see the little bit of filigree and stuff where the wrought iron was, where in the top, it's just a blur. Okay. But on the right, it's a really good example of photo AI. And I agree with this. It took out the creases and the folds and everything like that. You can take out there's always a little smudge spot or things like that. I think that's a great feature. The other thing with AI, and in the past, I've always said with photos, only delete a photo if you never ever want to see it again. And there are some out of focus photos that I wish I had back, because there is the ability now for AI to correct those photos. And what it does is, the way it works is, it has gathered enough photos to gather information and say, oh, let's do that. And especially on this one, the ability to make the reflection in this water that is a reflection of that sky that looks like it happened that way is pretty amazing. And to cut it in around the horse and not make it look like you've used scissors. It's just amazing. This one is a bit extreme. It's just China for illustrative purposes. A low res photo and pixelated photo did that. This is really a very extreme. You wouldn't have that pixelated, but it can do it. So we're going to get in and do some samples, some things with ChatGPT. And here's using to grow their business or their career. One real person using it, and then everybody else just trying to trick it and see what they can do with ChatGPT. So here are a couple ones I did with ChatGPT. So I said, well, let's try it this way. And we talked about languages. So I said, explain Newton's first law like Shakespeare would have spoken. And it came back and it said, hearken, fair folk, let me speak to thee of the great scholar Sir Isaac Newton and his wondrous first law of motion. Forsooth, he did proclaim that an object shall remain in its state of rest or uniform motion unless it is compelled by a force to alter its state. And I just did that for fun, and I thought it'd be kind of cool. And all I did was ask it that exact question. So I took it a little farther and I said, I've got the other one later. So that's just a brief history of AI. And remember, the basis of all this is AI. The buzzword now is ChatGPT, and that's just a variation of AI. So obviously, sitting in front of a computer, we won't need a robot for that because it'll be in the computer, but it's just kind of illustrative. And they're going to be working side by side, especially, I mean, think about it in dangerous factory situations, or part of the thing in factories is think about all the repetitive, the people that get repetitive injuries or repetitive stress situations from doing the same thing every day. So AI tomorrow and beyond, what's coming? Do you look forward to what it'll bring? Do you worry about what will happen? And this is good for discussion and questions. So I'll go into some examples here in a second, but I want to see if there's any input on implications, any questions at this point. And otherwise, I'm going to show you some examples. Feel free to unmute yourself. All right, so here is the Newton's one that I did. So is this on the screen? Al, can you see this big enough?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I said, do a popular rap song, and I didn't know any popular rap songs, so I figured I'd find one, like Shakespeare would have spoken. Hark, attend, good people, whilst I regale thee with a tale of a popular rap song in this style of Shakespearean tale. In days of old, a bard did spin a tale with rhymes most tight. He called it a rap, and when his words he set the world all right. I'll leave you to read the rest, but pretty interesting and funny, and it's just Harmon, go for it.
Okay, you're talking about the manufacturing robots.
Right.
Many decades ago, I was a BMW technician, and there'd be certain repairs and maintenance we'd have to do that felt like the engineers who designed the vehicle had no idea the size of a human hand, how you could get to the screw or the bolt that needed attention. And so it's occurring to me, are these robots building things? Are they designed so that only robots are going to be able to make repairs?
Well, okay. So there's kind of a great question. And let's tear that apart just a little bit, because for the time being, humans are designing the car. And as you know, one of the tough things about any design is repairability, and actually now a big deal is how recyclable is it? How can you tear it apart and things like that? And so a humanoid robot. Let's tear in your case, not being able to get in to do that because they add so much to it. So a good example, and it was pioneered at UC Davis, was robotic surgery for orthopedics. And the original knee and especially hip replacements done with a robot has been done for decades. And the idea is, and the reason wasn't because it was partially getting in there, but more than anything, those surgeries are one and done. You usually can't do it a second time because you have to destroy enough bone to get the prosthetic in there. So it has to be super accurate. And because you're putting it, for instance, in a hip, the angle is everything. And that angle has to be precise. And basically, in most things, it's like a doctor with a Makita drill. The doctor might be really good, but if he's a little bit off, it hollows it out and then it doesn't fit. So they pioneered this robotic surgery. And because it's a robot, and when I say robotic surgery, it's not like a humanoid robot. It's like a CNC machine, like a milling machine that can go in very accurately. So you don't have to have it shaped like a human hand, and it doesn't have to look like a Makita. It can be this long, perfectly, and they actually stabilize the leg, and it goes in perfectly where it needs to go and to the exact right depth, because a machine can do that. And again, it's much smaller. They don't have to their hands aren't in the way. So that robotic surgery made that much more accurate. Now, yes, it's still the doctor telling it what to do, but and actually one of these questions came up during the last presentation I did was, hey, what about robots doing surgeries and things like that? And it's a perfect example where the autonomous robot isn't doing it, but the robotic, the CNC machine. So by the way, CNC machines are those milling machines, computerized. Somebody knows this better than I do. But what it is you have a computer program that tells the milling head to go around and make these designs and different things like that. These metal signs that have cutouts in them, whether they're using a milling machine or a water jet, and it spells names and things like that. The computer is telling it what to do, and it's dead nuts accurate every time it does it, and it can repeat it 100 times. Well, that's where the robotic surgery is the best, and it works great. Now, don't think so. A humanoid looking robot may not be the best robot. If you look at most manufacturing, it's Kukla is the one machine that does a lot of these where they have a bunch of different arms and then they have a head on it and it does certain things and it's tasked for that. And what it is its movements are so easily regulated that and so accurately regulated, it can start and stop on a dime. And it's actually dangerous because they actually sequester those off with fences and stuff, because if somebody got in there, this robot's doing something really fast and it's got a lot of momentum to it. But it doesn't have to look like a humanoid. But the thought with the humanoid robot is it could take And if it has the dexterity and can do what the human can do with artificial intelligence, you tell the robot, you don't program the robot. Currently, you program the robot. In the case of the humanoid robot, you sit there and tell it to go do a task, and it figures out how to do that task. So that's, again, look up, and Al, you might be able to find the Boston Scientific and the one they did recently. Again, they tell it to go to this step way up there, and it does whatever it needs to get there and jumps up, and then something will come along and knock it over, and it knows to get up and go back to where it was. So that's a artificial intelligence humanoid type robot. But again, walking is good for us. It works. A robot doesn't have to walk. But then again, if it can walk, it can do anything a human can do. So that's where the humanoid robot comes in, and they can have a bunch of them to manufacture a car, for instance. They say, okay, go do this. Your job is to put this dash in this car, and it figures out how to do it. Now, that supercomputer may not be inside the robot. What it would be is that robot is wirelessly connected to the main computer that's doing all the artificial intelligence and processing it back and forth. But again, the computers are getting so small that computer could be on board onto that robot, and it can do thinking itself. The big thing there is just the expense of the chip. Does that answer your question? Oh, so the other thing it can do is, so if we look at design now, so there's still going to be regular mechanics, human mechanics working on that BMW. So what you can do is a computer could take, there's so much flow to a design. I mean, unfortunately, all the cars these days are designed because of the wind tunnel. But when they're designing the engine and things like that, they put it into a 3D graphics, and they actually see, okay, how would somebody get in and change this oil filter or change the spark plug and stuff. But you could program ChatGPT to take those things into accommodation and say, okay, here's a human hand that can only bend certain ways, and you need to have a ratchet wrench on the end of it. And what will this work in there? And it would go in and solve that problem for you. So, but
our kind of sick joke at the time was that the German designers realized there was a need to provide work for the thalidomide babies, so that they created these tight spaces that only their hands could get to.
Right. Or they develop a special tool that then you have to buy from BMW. I mean, think about a typical old distributor wrench. Sometimes they have all these weird angles in them and everything else. Yeah. So yeah, it's tough. And that's the confined spaces. And, they try to shoehorn larger motors in and things like that. But I don't always think that it's humanoid robots. And think back to that surgery. And I'll tell you, when and if I ever need my hips or my knees replaced, I'm happy to have a robotic surgeon do it, but it's not a humanoid robot in that regard. It's a machine. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, the podcast you recommended, Lex Friedman. He just had one on. Boy, that guy talks a long time, but very, very good.
He doesn't talk much. His guests talk a lot.
Right, over 2 hours. But I did do the speed up on that, and it really made the time go by very fast. But the Boston Dynamics CEO was on the one I heard.
Good.
And I think it was just tremendous. I think anyone on your Zoom presentation right now would really benefit getting a richer, more robust understanding if they could just tune into that Lex Friedman, listen to it.
Lex Friedman. And Al will put a link. He already did. So I got to tell you about Lex Friedman. And it's Friedman is how you say it, but it's Fridman, and I'll put the link. So his podcasts are long. He puts all the advertisements in the beginning. You can skip through them and stuff. And he's also the nicest guy. I always thought Clark Howard was the nicest guy. Lex is a very nice guy. And he is an MIT professor and scientist about artificial intelligence. And I had the pleasure of attending a Tesla thing, 6 years ago. And he was there speaking because he was working on artificial intelligence and self-driving. He since has gone beyond that, and he's fantastic. And he at the time thought Tesla's direction was wrong, and now he thinks Tesla's doing it the right way. But he has that full-time job, but he does a once-a-week podcast. It can be between an hour and a half and 3.5 hours. He has guests on there, not just about artificial intelligence. So when you go look at his list of podcasts, pick one of somebody you like and go from there, because it's amazing. But he lets them speak. It's long form, just amazing. And you'll get hooked. And as Randy said, remember, on most of your podcast apps, you can play it at 1.5 or 1 3/4 or 2 times speed, because some people, that's Clark Howard, for instance, I can play it at double speed and I hear him fine because he's a slow talker. If I ever hear him live, I think he's had a stroke because he's talking so slow. But with Lex, depending on who the guest is and how fast they speak, you can get, I look at it like I can listen to more podcasts if I can listen at 1.5 speed. So a 1 hour podcast only takes 40 minutes. So I can go on and do more podcasts. And that's what AirPod Pros are great. I keep them in my ear. I look forward to the time in a car when I can learn something from these podcasts, but he's in there. It's amazing. So I'm going to show you, before we transition here into photos, I want to show you a couple things live, how this works. And I've got to go here and change this. There we go. So I put in this thing called Roam, and it's roamaround.io. All one word, roamaround.io. It's a thing to do itineraries, and I'm going to just show you this example, and then we'll do one. So it comes up with a screen that's like this. It said build itinerary, and you type in this. So I just said Roseville, and it automatically builds a 7-day itinerary. So it built an itinerary here, and it says you can visit Maidu Historical Site, and you can do a hike. Here's the hike around Miners Ravine Trail. It's an 8-mile trail, and all these things. So it did 7 days. So I decided at the bottom, and this is where AI comes in, I said, make it for seniors. And then it goes around, and it still says go to Maidu Park, but no longer does it say to take that 8-mile hike. And it goes through and does some different things. So then I said, well, make the itinerary 3 days. So it's further refining that. And it's using just all the data it's gathered. And there it goes through some of the things. It's got the library, the Maidu Regional Park, and boom. And you could further define it. So if we just put in, so for instance, I have a trip coming up where I'm going to Amsterdam, Budapest, Dubai, South Africa, and then I'm doing a river cruise from Budapest up to Amsterdam. And I have put this in for every city along my way, even though there's organized tours in the groups I'm in. This way, if I have free time, I can look and see what the top things are. But then I also said, give me photographic scenes in those cities, and it goes through and sees and sees what other people have posted. But we'll just do Sacramento. Build itinerary. Boom. So there it's a 7-day. Oh, and I should say, by the way, you get down here to the bottom, and right here, it's a link. And so if I click this, it fires it up, and it said, an AI created my itinerary. And now it goes right to this link. And in fact, it doesn't, you don't have to it doesn't have to be online with it. It's your particular one you just did. So I'll take that off. And then, so I said, now let's make it 2 days. And there it is, building it right there. And you can see what it's doing in the background. It went to V8, which is a tour place. You'll see some of the time the code's coming in. Yeah, it's using V8 quite a bit there, which is really a pretty good little site. Working, oh, go to the firehouse because you're down there. They use TripAdvisor. So it looks, I just noticed this, it looks like it's always using V8, which is interesting. So there you go. So that's a version of ChatGPT that's more for tours and cities. So this is one that is pretty interesting. So this is called deep fakes. This is 11 Labs and just the 11labs.io, the spelled out 11. And prior to this, I had recorded my speech just talking. I just read something for a minute. And I submitted it, I uploaded it to 11 Labs. And it processed my voice. Now, I'll read this to you, and then I'll tell it to read it to you in my voice. Now, I'm not recording this. This is me live. Is it live or is it Memorex? The chatbot is designed to understand natural language, which means that you can ask questions in the same way that you ask a person.
Is it live or is it Memorex? The chatbot is designed to understand natural language, which means that you can ask questions in the same way that you would ask a person.
Does that sound like me? So to prove that it's basing it on what I did, let's go ahead and
is it live or is it Memorex? Was that really me?
I should put a question mark on that.
When I played back, it was at a much lower volume.
Right, because I'm talking, it's coming, you're hearing it through the microphone through my computer speakers.
Mhm.
And then you can go in and tweak it, and I'll show you that also. But I just wanted to prove that I didn't do the other.
Is it live or is it Memorex? Was that really me? What do you think?
So you can go in and change the voice settings to make it better. Like, for instance, when I'm giving a presentation, I tend to speak much faster. So I could speed that up and do different things here. And there's ways to tweak it. I didn't do any tweaking. I took exactly what it did when it recorded my voice. I also did some other ones. I did Lex Fridman. We'll have him do it.
Is it live or is it Memorex? The chatbot is designed to understand natural language, which means that you can ask questions in the same way that you would ask a person. Is it live or is it Memorex? Was that really me?
See, I should have put more punctuation in here for pauses. And that sounds, if Randy, you shook your head, yes, that sounds just like Lex talking. So in other words, you can make anyone say anything at this point, and it can be done with video now. So here's good old OpenAI, and it's chat.openai.com. And I can just ask it a question. I can say, let's see, give me.
You don't need to load an app on your computer?
Nope, this is strictly in the browser. Is that large enough for you guys to see? Apple Computer's a Tech Night, so it goes through the whole thing about Apple. So then I could tell it to give me a simple or a short version of it. And I'm going to go over here to some chats that I did. Let's see, it's in text edit. I said, give me a history of quantum computing. I said, give me a short history, fully explained. In fact, by the way, all of the information on artificial intelligence I had on the slides was derived from asking ChatGPT how about the history of artificial intelligence. You can see it right there. So I asked it also golf. I said, in simple terms, how do you play golf? And then it comes up with just a few lines. Then it says, fully explain in detail how you play golf. And it goes through. So you can have it do anything you want. You can say, give me a message thanking my friend for a great dinner. Oh gosh, Ken. Sorry, my type it doesn't work using dictation right now. So, hey, and then friend's name. Actually, if I said the friend, it would do it. Just want to say thank you very much for the amazing dinner last night. The food was delicious and the company was even better. I really appreciate all your effort you put into making everything perfect. It was such a wonderful evening, and I feel so lucky to have you as a friend. Thanks again for everything. So, and actually, let's see, we'll try it. I'll put the person's name in there. I'll just say Jane. And now it comes up. Dear Jane, I wanted to take a moment to thank you. So it did the same thing. So you can craft letters that way, do code, talks about, oh, and actually the Apple history is pretty good. So let's see. Let's show you one other one here called Stable Fusion. So I've got some examples I did. I need to go to my sheet. Okay. So there's one out there that I'm trying to get in and I haven't been able to get signed in. Al, post, what is it? It's midjourney.com. One word, midjourney.com is beautiful. I'll show you some examples. But here's one called Stable Diffusion. So when it says prompt, I'm putting in these words. A person riding a camel, the treasury in Petra. So it's working in the background. I don't like these ads on the side. Those didn't used to come up. So it's working on, so I've told it, you can't read the text. It says, person riding a camel at the treasury or the treasury in Petra. So it's working. It's pretty slow. There's a lot of people using it right now. I'll go back and get my next one ready. It's almost done. Boy, I've never seen it take that long. There you go. So there aren't camels in Petra, but it's got someone riding a camel in Petra in front of the treasury. So we'll do another one, riding a motorcycle in front of the treasury in Petra. And then let me do, let's see. While it's loading these, please ask questions. This is the perfect time because it usually goes faster. And again, this is stable diffusion. Kathy, go right ahead. There you go.
So, yeah, are they just like the zebra one? Are they just adding a zebra, or is there really a photo out there like that?
They're adding the zebra, and I'll show you.
Okay.
No, great question. Now, that's why I'm showing you a female riding a motorcycle at the treasury in Petra, because it's going to generate that.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, it's so slow, and I should have saved some images. And the last one I'll do will really show that. But there you go. A female riding a motorcycle in front of that. So what they have done is they've essentially copied an image of a female on a motorcycle and put it in front of an image of Petra. So the last one I'll do to really show it to you is a gorilla on top of the Empire State Building. Oops, hang on, stop. Now, generate, Yeah, I had to put the extra word in there. We'll see if it does. It's getting a little faster. So any other questions while we're doing that? And you can see the Roamer IO was the Roam Around IO, 11 labs, stable diffusion, OpenAI, it's chat.openai.com. And then the other one, Midjourney, and you have to sign up for a Discord account on that. But Midjourney is putting out some artwork that's just incredible. And we'll do one last one on this. And we'll go in and show how AI is used in photos. Come on. Oh, yes. There you go. There's a gorilla on top of the Empire State Building eating pizza. Thought you'd never see it, I'll bet. All right. And then I'm going to load this last one, but I'll move over to photos and then come back when it has a result. Okay. So this is telling it to do it in a certain form, like you could say, do like Picasso would do it. All right, I will move over to photos. Actually, we'll go back to what we're going to do here in Keynote really quick. We're going to go over with photos. We'll go briefly over getting started photo management, then we're going to dive a little deeper into the editing, because most of you were, and there's recorded, was our last general meeting on that. So let's go back to this, still working, and let's go to photos. So I'm going to quit photos and restart photos from my other library that I have just for this. Oh, there you go. So this is a horse on top of a sunny mountain in the style of DreamWorks ArtStation. So you can see that it does this, and this is kind of graphic art that it does it a little better than it did photos. So it's saying on top of a sunny mountain, in the style of DreamWorks. So we could change that to a snowy mountain, and we'll tell it to generate in the background while I fire up photos. Now, when you fire up photos, I'm going to switch to a different library. So I'm going to use the one that I made just for this, so it doesn't have all my huge photos. And that's how you do it. You hold the option key, the option key while firing up photos. So we went through earlier how to create albums. And remember, you just create a new album, you drag your photos over to it, but it doesn't duplicate your photos. It, in fact, just creates a pointer to the main library where all your photos are. Your main library is almost always sorted chronologically. Once you get it into a album, you can change the sort order however you want. Okay. Let's see here. So there, it changed it from a sunny mountain to a snowy mountain. And that's all done by just what was typed in to have it do it. Okay. Any last questions on AI for now? I'm happy to answer at the end too, and we'll rip into photos. Okay, good. All right. So the main thing with photos is, let me move my little zoom bar out of the way that you guys don't see. So photos is the repository for all your photos. And the coolest thing with photos is I can reach out and use other programs, but my photos are stored in what I call the shoebox, where all my photos are, and that's in the photos library. So if I go in and I make some modifications, if I do some different things, it will go and always allow me to revert back to photos. By the way, this is just to the left of that photo with the, and I had a good sky. That's not a fake sky. That's my sky. This is the mountain that you saw with the horse. I don't have that photo here, the one like it, but this is that same location in Iceland. So anyway, if we take something like, well, I'll go to this one. So this is photos. I'm trying to move my thing around. There you go. Sorry, I'm getting my Zoom. You guys don't see it. My Zoom icons are in the way, so I had to move them. So I go into a photo and I can do anything I want to this photo. So there's, let's see, if we zoom in, there's some power lines right here. Some power lines right here. I'm going to go and get rid of those power lines. So if I click edit and then retouch, and if I move this, you can barely see it. I can adjust the size. And I'm going to do what I can to get rid of that telephone pole. Telephone pole is gone. Now I'm going to remove the wires. Wires are gone. Didn't do a real good job there, so I'll do it again. There. Those wires are gone. So that's using this little retouch tool. Now that's using artificial intelligence also. In fact, let's see if I can remove this tree. Look at that. That tree's gone. Do that, it's gone. I can always undo each step of that. The tree's back. The lines are back. And now the telephone pole's back. So you can undo if you want, but again, retouch, and then use retouch. Now, I used to use a special program for this. I'll even get rid of the shadow from the tree. And you look at that, and I'm zoomed in pretty far. There used to be a program called Snap Heal that I used a lot because Apple's built-in version on that wasn't very good. And it's fantastic. So retouch, that's how you can get rid of, like, let's say this bush, this little bush down here is a distraction. And the little white rock is a distraction. So I'll go and click on the little brush by retouch. And again, I adjust the slider for the size I want. And I'm going to take and bring it down here to the rock, and I click it and see it kind of replaces it with gravel that was behind it. And I'll do here, get rid of the bush, and see the gravel looks like it was there. Pretty amazing. So that's retouch. Now I'm going to go out here, and let's just say I decide to crop this photo. I go up here and I say crop. I just want to, I'm going to ruin my photo just for, by the way, these are tree climbing goats in Morocco. It's not an everyday occurrence that you see tree climbing goats. They actually do climb the tree. So let's say I decided I wanted to crop the photo like this. I hit done, and then great. Well, that's not really what I was looking for. So no matter what I do in photos, I can click edit. And then I go up to the upper left and say revert to original. And it will go back to my original thing. And you'll notice the things that I got out of the way, the bush, the rock, and the power lines are also back. So we always go to our original. And you can also do a thing called markup. But that's actually on the phone. So Bev, you had a question? Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Yes, got it. When cropping, describe the difference between dragging a corner in and just moving the sides in, and also in terms of how it remains for the photo to be in its a standardized format.
Great question. So if you, and it's probably a little small for you guys, but if you look in the upper right corner, first off, how do I get to crop? So I'm in, I have to double click on the photo. And then I go up to the right-hand corner and hit edit. And normally you'll get some menus here, or yours may be a lot smaller like this with no menus. But anyway, and you may even have add there or something like that. But right across the top, you have adjust filters and crop. When you hit crop, the first thing I'll show you here is on the right-hand side, you see what looks like a protractor. And what this is your ability to adjust the photo if, for instance, it's not straight up and down, okay? If you had to take the photo a little bit wrong. And the nice thing is when you're doing this, you get these faint lines that you can use to line up on things. Before we get into adjusting it, you can also look in the upper right here. You have this thing called flip, which would be flipping the photo, okay? You don't want to do that in this case because I've written on it, but sometimes you'll flip a photo. Then the aspect ratio. So you have a way you can do the photo as, for instance, a 4:3, a 5:7, if you're going to print out a 5:7, 16.9, which is a computer screen, or freeform or square. That's what social media uses, square a lot. You can do custom, or you can do it original. So that's the original format that the photo was taken in. And by the way, you can adjust from landscape to portrait. But if you just do original, it's always original, or you can do free form. Free form allows me to do cropping however I want. So if I grab any corner, for instance, the upper right corner, and when I get there, I get these arrows. So at this point, when I grab that, I can come down or in or at an angle. See, I can go in or down or an angle. Let's put it back where it was. And remember, I can always...
When you adjust from the corner, does that preserve the original aspect ratio?
Yes, yeah, good question. I'm getting there. So if I go to original, because when I'm in free form, watch, I can distort it, see? Or here. See how it's not the original? See, this is much narrower. And this way it's much shorter. It's not keeping original unless I hit original. And then when I adjust it, it won't let me distort it. It will only do it in the original order. I'm trying to bring it down. I'm trying to bring it in. No, it will only do it in your original form, which in this case, I think is 4:3, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So that's the difference with having original. So free form lets you do what you want, and square, same thing. It stays square. I cannot change that. So if I go back to original, and obviously if you're in a 5:7, like I said, 4:3 is okay. So, and you can always hit undo. So that's very important on cropping. And like many times you'll, for effect, you would want, let's see if we can find one. Let's hit done, because there's some photos that lend themselves to be cropped. This photo, for instance, let's see. No, it was cropped outside of photos. I don't have, I can't revert to the original on it. My fault. So like, let's say I wanted to crop this in and not have the bush. It defaults to freeform. No, and then the other question was, what happens if you grab the sides versus the corners? So if I want less stuff on the top, you'll notice when my arrow goes up here, it changes to that. I just pull down. Whether I go left or right, it won't do anything. And if I go over here to the right, it only brings it in from the right. Okay, got rid of that bush. If I grab the corner, I can move it left, right, up, down, or diagonally, whatever I want. Okay, so if you were going to do that, you might do this, and you have kind of a neat effect. So that's because freeform, I can do that. This looks more like a panorama. So I'm going to revert to original. There we go. And done. So in the edit mode, first and foremost, one thing that comes up is this magic wand. The magic wand is your go-to. It uses artificial intelligence to say, this is what Apple thinks will make this photo look better. So if I click that, you'll notice it brightened it. So I'm going to undo it, and you'll see it again. It's a little bit dark. So if I hit that, it brightened it up. But let's show you how to do that same thing. So if I go and click edit, and I'm no longer on crop, I'm up here on adjust, I get these things. And most of the time, you may have one where you'll have a plus sign, and that's to add more of these tools. So I click on the little chevron to expose these tools. Now, we're going to start with light. You'll notice these are not lined up. They're not in a straight line because I hit the magic wand and it did some adjustments for me. And I'm going to turn the magic wand off. You'll notice they're all right in the center. Well, that's like listening to your music without adjusting it. This is adjusting the photo. Here's what it thinks is best. So I can get there by adjusting it the same way, but the computer says, hey, this might be a better way to do it. And frankly, it looks pretty good that way because it's brightened up the dark there. And what I want to point out is one thing it did is this one called shadows. And I'm going to bring up some other photos to do it. But let's talk. So anytime I use these little adjustments, and by the way, there's an auto thing right there. You can tell it to do it automatically and tell it not to do it. See, there it's off, there it's on. And this little looping thing that you can barely see there is undo. So you can, let's do this. I'm going to make my shadows extreme. So that brightened up what was in the shadow. Whenever you use these sliders, I highly recommend you go from one extreme to the other to see how it affects that. And then you come back and say, oh, let's see, that's about where I want it right there, because that's pretty blown out. Do here, and this is shadows. Now, if I don't like that, I can use Command Z or this little undo, and it undoes what I just did. Command Z would do it on itself. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to put this way over here. And then I just on my keyboard, Command Z. And here's where your cheat sheets are for those. Undo is Command Z. Redo is Shift Command Z. It redoes what you just did. There you can see it's dark again. Nope, I want it less dark. But within light and within color, I can do two different things. Rather than working on individual sliders, I can go here and move this slider and get an overall and see what it's doing to all the different sliders themselves. So here's light. So this is overexposing it. This is underexposing it. And I might find it somewhere in between. So if I messed up and I don't like it, I'll just hit Command Z. Now, down on the color one, you have the same thing. You can go, well, black and white, there's not much color there. Or you can make the thing look like it's drawn with a crayon and overcolor it, or somewhere in between. So we're going to reset, Command Z. But let's say I just want to give it a little more color. I can just do here. And if you'll notice the bush and the background, it's just giving it more color. Go all to extreme or go not. But hey, see, that's fake. That's not what it looked like. So you draw it back and see what it is. Okay. I'm going to go to another photo. In fact, I'm going to revert to original and hit done. And if you quit the program and come back to it, you can always do revert to original. Let's go to, this might be a good one. So I'm going to go here and let's use the shadow command. This was an iPhone photo, which I find that, believe it or not, the magic wand doesn't do as much on iPhone photos because it does a really good job. But if we go down here to shadows, I'm going to try bring out, and you'll see the trees in the background and the buildings become a little brighter. And it's not oversaturating. So if you want that, I like the more subtle effect, but you could always bring out, for instance, the background, the bridge, the things like that. Now, you'll notice that this snow has a tendency to create a blue cast on a lot of things. There's a tool down here called neutral gray. Now, it's got a little eyedropper on it. So what I do is I clicked on it, and I'm going to go try find something that doesn't have to necessarily be gray, but right here in the center on this church, the roof has pretty even white snow. So let's click on that and let's watch how it affects the color of our photo. So you'll notice it made more of a warm tint and it got rid of the blue in the snow. So I'll undo it. I like this because it's the blue hour. This is after sunset. But if you don't like the blue hue, you come over and say neutral gray or neutral white. And I can even hit right over here on this snow on the left. And that's the true color. I could take another spot. If it's not what I want, I can go to the roof up here. See, that's too warm. And I can adjust the warmth over here, make it more or less warm. Warm is more yellows. Cold is more blue. I'm going to go back to the original roof that we know is very pure white and do that. And now you can see, I think this is more of a true color. So that's, again, neutral gray. There's other things you can do to highlight certain colors. Let's try get another photo for that. And let's see here. It might work on this. So here's one. I can hit edit, and I'm going to tell it to really accentuate, the red. And I'm going to say, so you'll notice I'm telling it just saturate red. You'll notice the blue sky isn't changing. Okay. I'm telling it to oversaturate the red. I'll say, turn that off, and let's go to the blue, the dark blue sky, and let's oversaturate the blue. You'll notice less, more. I'm picking a spot color and telling it what to do. And the sky is actually kind of a combination of both blues. So you'll have to saturate them both a little bit if you really want the blue to come through. So now the blue is really there, not at the expense of red or anything else. Okay. So these sliders, you have all kinds of different things. For instance, in the background here, that's a little shadowy. So let's pull out of the shadows. Now you can see more of the rock and stuff back there. This is a tough situation because this is full sunlight and the desert's reflecting a lot. So any questions on those things on the side? And Al and Bob, you guys are, and Keith, great photographers. You guys can comment on any of these too and help out. Actually, this one is one you could use. You could boost the yellows if you wanted to and things like this. So as far as shooting, it's important. Panoramas are wonderful to use. This is a great spot. In fact, this shot is an iPhone shot, and this is the mountain farther back as a panorama from almost the same location, slightly left of it. And then this was slightly more to the left, same location. So don't forget panoramas. They're wonderful. You can always crop them down. You could change this photo's complexion completely by hitting edit, crop, and then just bring it in. And that's a whole different photo now. Bring this up so you don't have the green grass. There you go. You've got a completely different photo. This is Bow Lake up north of Banff, by the way. And when you're taking panoramas, don't forget to do vertical panoramas. So when you do a panorama, your phone is in an upright position when you're doing a normal panorama like we just looked at here. You hold your phone upright because the photo is already going to be wide. Don't make your phone wide, and you do a pano. So you do this pano, and then you come back and you can process it. And when you're doing a panorama upright, this is called this is the seek. This is where you go through this slot canyon to get to the treasury in Petra. And it was a great way to capture it. Also, when you go up to the redwoods or skyscrapers to get the whole one, don't forget to do vertical panoramas. Let's see.
Ken, by the way, your photos are just stunning, I have to say.
Well, thank you. I'm very lucky to be in spots that happen to work. You know,
you make it happen.
Well, I wish I could take a lot of credit for it, but it's really good tools and good spots, but thank you. Let's see here. And actually I was taking pictures of this bridge, and this family came up with this thing, and they were doing some photos because she had a wedding coming up. And so I asked them to pose and stuff, and it was great, and got to know them, great people. And this is in Buenos Aires, by the way. And actually this is on this bridge, really unique bridge. This is a bridge that is these cables hold up the rest of the bridge from this big arm. And this is a bridge that pivots to, here it is. This is the bridge. And right over here on the right is where it meets, and it pivots on this. So it's broken here and broken here, and it pivots out of the way for, for traffic. I thought it was really cool. Excuse me. So as far as what you do with your photos is how do you share them? How do you put them different places? What do you want to do with them? So first of all, you want to make a slideshow, and you can look like a hero. Unfortunately, when people pass, you're sometimes called upon. Oh, Keith, you got a question? Go ahead.
My first comment is I didn't realize you could do all of these adjustments, all these editing adjustments in photos on your in that app. I've been using Lightroom for years, and almost all of the things you can do in Lightroom you can do in photos, and I'm very impressed by that. But I do have one question. I didn't see a dehaze slider in photos. Does it have one?
I think
Dehaze is used really well for long distancing, mountains in there to get rid of the fog and haze in an image.
So this one wouldn't be fair, but so back to your question. So Keith uses Lightroom. I use Luminar and Affinity and some other things. But the capabilities of the Photos program itself has gotten dramatically better. In fact, the perfect example is when I was eliminating those power lines and that used to be so pedestrian and not good. I used a specific program for it, but it doesn't have the granularity that you do in those other programs, but it's improved a lot. But the ability to break out of photos and do the other, I'll show in a sec. But as far as I think there's a denoise.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah, there's a denoise, but there's not a haze.
Okay.
I use Affinity haze removal. In fact, let's not use this one. And it's just part of the Affinity package, but it's a one shot. Let me find a photo that would lend itself to it. Actually, this one might. Let's just do it. I'm going to click it and I'm going to hit Affinity haze removal. So by the way, these are all programs that you can do. You could have it open in Lightroom. You could have it open in Luminar, which is really incredible. In fact, my Luminar Neo, there's Luminar AI, Luminar Neo. I could replace this guy if I wanted, but it's just amazing. But anyway, Affinity haze removal, and that's good for distance stuff. It takes a second. And now you see the difference between the two. It also is a bit of an HDR booster. But what I want to point out is on the right-hand side here, these mountains in the distance, see how they're hazy? Yeah. I'm removing the haze. And that's a one-touch deal. And I, of course, can adjust it over here for distance and the strength. I could make it stronger. I could make it less. And I can change the exposure correction. But the beauty of these things is you can see before and after. So and then let's look at what it does to these clouds. I really like this HDR effect.
Yeah.
So I'm going to cancel that so I have that to work with the rest of the time. But that's the haze removal. Noise is a different thing. For instance, I'll bet you I can do denoise on the photo of my mom and dad. This would be a good one. See how this is kind of noisy? And this isn't great at it, but this is where the AIs come in really good. So I'm going to say noise reduction. How much? Oh, come on. No, I think this one's pretty tough. So, and I don't think it's a good one for that.
Okay.
I think you have other tools for that. But there's so many different things. And again, the light and it's just, well, and like in here, there's these little white flecks, the shininess on my mom's nose. You could use the things for that. But, and then the problem is, if you modify stuff too much, sometimes it starts to look fake too.
Yeah.
So you gotta play that and make sure. So anyway, back to
I've got one other question.
oh, sure, go ahead.
The iPhone has GPS data on the phone.
Yes.
Does the GPS data of where you take this image transfer automatically to the metadata of the image?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
That's a question.
that was with my Sony. Let me see. I know this was an iPhone one. That wasn't.
Deb has had her hand up for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry, Deb. I missed it. Go right ahead. Unmute yourself.
That's okay. My mind's going all over the place. With on the sidebar there, I don't remember seeing some of those menus. Is that
Are you
newer?
talking about the right or the left side?
The right. No,
Okay.
when you're editing, some of that, like the retouch, I don't remember seeing that when I've worked with my photos. Is this somewhat newer?
Yeah, let me try something here. No, they're there, but they're not exposed. So at the bottom of the sidebar, in fact, anybody else have photos open that doesn't have all of these things? Is there a plus sign or an add at the bottom?
I saw an option because like under light, I didn't see all the different brilliance, exposure, highlights, but then I clicked on options and I got a drop down. I don't know if that's what Deb is talking about.
Did you hit the little arrow, you mean?
Well, there's options under.
Okay, are you on Ventura?
No,
Okay.
one before.
Okay, so the thing is what happens is like sharpen and neutral gray or white balance, those things might not be there. And so there should be options or add.
Okay.
And then we'll think of it like a palette. Okay. It's the painter's palette where you're starting off with red, green, and blue, 3 basic colors. And what we did is you can add more things to the palette, and you have to hit plus or options, and then you can select the ones you want to put here. And that's why I opened a new library. I was hoping that it would show me the pluses or minuses on how to add these things, because I've added them all, so they're here. And once you add them, then you can go in and hit the disclosure to do that. Oh, I know. Here's the options. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's and once the options are open, but you don't have the one that says retouch is the problem, right?
I don't recall. I haven't done photo editing in a bit, so.
Do you have it open right now?
I don't remember that one, or I just didn't know what it was.
Well, does anybody have photos open, and on the right-hand side, they don't have all of these things? Because I need to know what's at the bottom, and it should say add or something. And it's been so long since I've added these.
I have it open. Let's see. So scroll down at the bottom. I have reset adjustments.
No, not reset adjustment.
And I have vignette. I see vignette on yours.
Is vignette okay? And you have all the ones in between.
And sharpen. Yeah, I got a bunch in between levels.
Okay. Because you used to have to activate certain ones. By the way, once you make an adjustment, like I just changed contrast here, that's when you get reset adjustments down there. Otherwise, it's blank. So again, somebody will bring this up.
I got retouch.
Do you have vignette at the bottom? Okay, good. So that means that it loads them all now. It used to be, a few years ago, you didn't even have all of these things listed. You had to add them. So it sounds like they're all there. So let's talk about what happens. So if I go light, the first thing is I have a chevron. a right facing arrow. I hit that one time and I go there. And now I can do this adjustment.
Right.
But then I have another thing called options, because think about it, Apple. First of all, it closes that and you say auto. So autos means just do it automatically, whatever you think is best, Apple.
That's what I generally have done.
Well, and that's to be honest, where the magic wand comes in. The magic wand does a great job on its own, and it sets all of those. So the whole thing is you can go super simple, or you can get almost as granular as you can in a program like Luminar or Affinity or Lightroom. So I can go to Light, and I'm just using it as an example. I click it one time. Now I can adjust it.
Uh-huh.
And remember, the magic wand sets it the first time what I want. It's in the center. Then I hit the magic wand. It says, well, this photo, I should maybe do that. So then, and I'm going to turn that off because it kind of makes it weird. And then I say, well, let me do it manually. And then I go to one extreme and the other extreme. And then I go, okay, that looks good. But then I say, well, let's get even a little more granular. And I go here and I expose options. And now I can say, well, yeah, let's turn my brightness down a little bit for effect. I'm going to up my contrast. I want my contrast less. I'm going to go exposure. And I'm doing each of these, excuse me, these 7 things are all adjusted when I move this slider. See how they're moving around?
Yeah. I have another question.
Okay, one more thing here I want to point out.
Yeah.
There's also this thing called curves that people use sometimes, and histogram. And if you use a histogram, you can see what happens when you do these adjustments for your light. I use my eye because I don't know how to read a histogram. Okay. And you can also adjust your histogram too. A lot of people adjust that. So go ahead with your question.
I've done a lot of, I'm into genealogy, and I've been working a lot with photos of ancestors. And sometimes the photo I have to start with is very, very small.
Right.
And I found there's absolutely nothing I can do to get it to be in a sizable, Mike, so that I could frame it. The other thing is sometimes I will enlarge a photo or work with a photo, but it's the size I want and everything, but it then looks grainy or fuzzy.
Sure.
And
So
can you do anything about that?
Well, yes. And it's only recently you can do something fairly effectively about it. So when you think about it, a small picture, that's a small amount of data.
Yeah.
That's a small amount of data. And you can blow that. Well, for instance, this photo, if I blow it up, see how it gets less clear?
Yes.
Even though it's a pretty good photo, you're trying to enlarge a photo and you can't add more data to it. So you're just making a bigger version of the bad data. Now, that's where artificial intelligence comes in. There's a program out from Topaz. Lightroom does it now. Firefly with Adobe. Luminar does it. And there's the one that I know is called Topaz Gigapixel AI. And what it actually does is it takes any photo, it doesn't have to be a small one, and tries to make it have more data by interpolating and assuming what's behind it. Now, remember how I got rid of the power lines and the rock and everything?
Right.
It interpolated what would be behind it. So that's the same thing that the AI uses for that. So unfortunately, it's just, you're only as good as your data, and your data is small to begin with.
Right.
And so it's going to help a little, but it's not going to help a lot. And you got to remember too, even those photos back then, so they're not a digital photo, obviously, but
Yeah.
secondly, they didn't have a lot of resolution to begin with. So even though it's small, your source itself isn't really clean. I mean, if you look back to that picture of me with that paper that was all speckled, it just didn't work.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. You can't make a picture that's a little blurry. You can't.
Yes, you
define
can
it.
now. You can now with Gigapixel AI and some of the other AI ones. I don't know what it's called with Lightroom, but yes, you absolutely can.
But
So
it's with other
don't get rid of
programs.
what's that?
It's with other programs.
Yes, and some of them are costly. Some not so bad, but it's out there. So my recommendation always is don't ever delete a photo unless you never, ever, ever want to see it again.
So I'm keeping the blurry ones, but I just can't put them in a frame and hang them.
Sure. Well, yeah, you can, really small. And you know
Well,
what?
they're blurry no matter what they are.
To be honest, on photos like that, they're almost better making like a collage. And
Okay,
because if you blow it up, it's going to blow it out is what it really does. Good question though. All right. Let's see here. So back to, I want to show how to make a slideshow. So basically you go to these are my library of my photos. And I'm going to select just a handful of photos here, and I'm going to do some things. I'm going to click and drag and select about 10 photos here. I have 18 selected, excuse me. So first thing I can do from this group is we're going to create an album. So I go to file. Don't do smart albums yet, but since I have 18 photos highlighted, it says, oh, do you want to create a new album with selection? So I say yes, and I'm going to click that. And then it's highlighted here. And I can make this, I can call it test album 2. So now I've named that album. These are all the photos in that album. But let's go back to my library. So here's the one of my parents at their wedding. So if I go back to the library and let's say, and I'm doing this and I go, well, I don't remember, is that photo in the album? I'm going to make sure it's in the album. Oh, I keep trying to put it in there. It won't let me. Well, that means it's already there. So it prevents you from putting duplicates in it. But I know that this hazy one is not in there. So if I try to add it to it, it lets me and it doesn't bounce back. So it added it to the album right there. So once I have an album, I can create a slideshow. So I go up here. 2 ways I can do this. I can control click and say create slideshow, and I'm using the Photos app, or there are other apps in the App Store, but the Photos app is great. Or I can go up here and say file, create slideshow from Photos. Now, other things I can do, I can make a book, a calendar. Apple used to do that, but now they leave it off to other places like Mixbook and some other ones that you do it and you load the photos into it. But realistically, slideshow, I'm going to do photos. So I'm going to call this test album 2 slideshow, and it's adding those 19 pictures. If I had only one picture selected, it would only do a slideshow of one picture. And trust me, one picture is not a slideshow. So I'm going to say, okay. So now down below, I now have a project. It has created a project. And within the project, I should point out, back when I did my test album 2, I could have changed this order however I want, okay? So that's where you put everything in the order you want, because in the library, they're always chronologically. So now I'm going to go back to my test presentation. Oh, actually, it's test album 2. So now it's put a slideshow down here, and you can barely see it on the bottom. The photos are really small. Well, you may not want this little test album text here. So all I do is I go to that first slide and I click where the text is, the little black box, and I delete that. Now I don't need that on there. Now let's say I want my second slide. Oh, let's say I want this to be my first slide. I move it along to there. It's the first slide. Okay. This, by the way, is looking toward Jackson out behind the old Aerojet. And this was after rain. And so this is just one of those ponds that form out there. Nice sunrise. Anyway, so I've got my timeline down there. And if I just hit play, it automatically plays it. It automatically puts some canned music in there. And that's a slideshow. But over here on the right, oh, and by the way, this is your loop down here in the lower right corner. But over here on the right are your adjustments. First of all, I can say, well, I don't want classic. I might want vintage prints. So I'm going to click vintage prints. And what it does here is it makes it, and this is a wonderful one if you're doing memorials for people where you'll have black and white and you'll have photos of it. It does a really good job of figuring out landscape versus portrait photos, and it will make and put the other photos behind it like it's laid out on a table and it's in black and white behind it. So I'll play this one. So it also changed its music, and we'll talk about that. There are all kinds of settings over here. And again, for landscape photos, vintage prints don't usually work well for it, but it changes different things. Ken Burns effect, you know about that. We're going to close that window and we're going to go to music. Now, for vintage prints, it has its own music. And I have to tell you, it's called royalty-free music, and it is able to be used, and you can put this on YouTube, you can put it anywhere, because Apple has licensed this music to be able to be used anywhere. It's royalty-free, which means you don't have to worry about copyright infringement. So, and you have different ones you can use depending on which slideshow you pick. If you pick reflections, you'll see that it's Mike Snow and a different horse or something like that. And again, I need to get rid of that, and it gets rid of the test there. This is an interesting one too. So the music, though, you can add music from your music library. Now, you have to be careful, because if you add music from your music library, which would be Apple Music or iTunes, you are subject to, if you put it on YouTube, of it getting taken down. Even though it's not for commercial, there's ways, and you might have it stripped out of your YouTube video if you want. Obviously, you can get this to people. You can do different things. You can't necessarily email it. We'll talk about that in a second. The last thing is the timing of the slides. So generally speaking, a slide is between 4 to 6 seconds long is what you want. And if you make a slideshow with, say, 3 songs in it, first what you do is you take your slideshow and figure out how many slides you have. And when you figure out how many slides you have, you calculate using 5 seconds a slide to figure out how much music you'll need. Then you grab all the music you want and you say, okay, that slideshow is going to be 15.5 minutes long for 5 seconds a slide. Then you go find some music that's approximately 15.5 minutes long with all the songs combined, and you can change the order of the songs. And then what you do at the very end, if you're about right, and you've calculated well, and you say fit to music, it might end up being 5.4 seconds per slide, but it actually makes that entire slideshow fit the exact length of the music. And that is so nice because it's very smooth. And then if you're going to put it on a presentation, again, a memorial for a friend, or you're doing a slideshow about a trip you did, you can put it in loop mode, and then it will continue to play and play and play. Generally speaking, I get asked to do memorials for people. It's super easy. You get all the photos. Everybody gets all the photos to you. You put them in an album. You figure out what photos you're going to use. And I usually do 2 different albums. One is for a short memorial presentation that you really show. And then the other one is you do a long one with all the photos that everybody gave you. And it runs in the background as people enter the service, and it's playing until the actual service starts. And then it plays at the end, and it can just be running on a loop through the projector, through the TVs, whatever. So once you have it in a project, you can play it, of course, but you need to export the photos. That's not what we're looking to do here. You export the slideshow. And when you hit export slideshow, you determine what you want it. You always want to use the highest definition you can. And then you hit save. And it saves it as a movie all together. Okay. Now, you can't email that. So I'm going to show you what you do here in a couple cases. It's too large to email that. We're going to go back to our test album 2 with our 18 photos. I'm going to show you how you share those. First off, I can go here, and if I hit mail, a new email pops up, and it shows I have all 18 photos, and it said medium. And it means it's 1.9 megabytes. And I'll be done here in a second. This is the last thing. If I go actual size, it's 18 photos. And oh my gosh, I get the red warning. It's 72 megabytes. You can't email 72 megabytes. So if I reduce it to large, oh, it's now 5.7 megabytes. And that's good. And if somebody wants a particular photo full size, they can ask you. But usually, you just want to do it in medium. And to be honest, most people, when they send you photos, they're in small. And look at this, it's under a megabyte. You never, ever want to send more than 10 megabytes worth of photos, because you might be able to send it, but they might not be able to receive it. So what happens in the case of having that movie or that slideshow, and if you want to share it, you export it first, but in that case where we had this album of 18 photos, if I take all of those albums, I can also share it and create a shared album. And by creating a shared album, it goes into your cloud, and then you get a link you can share with other people, and they can click on it, and therefore they can view those photos full size, and they can download them if you want. Or if you're on a trip or it's a wedding and other people have photos, they can add or download to and from your shared album. So a shared album is wonderful. Once you save the movie from the slideshow, it'll be in photos too, and you can share that in a shared album. All right, that's a lot to get your head wrapped around. And we got into pretty good editing, formatting, the folder construction and stuff. You can look at the last video of the last meeting. So it is past noon. Most people still look awake.
Bev has one last question.
Yeah, Bev has a question, and then I'm opening up for other ones after that. Go ahead, Bev.
About our Android friends, when we share something.
Oh, wait. That's an oxymoron. Android
friends.
And you need new friends.
Well, it's family.
Yeah, so what can you do to them? First, you can always email it to them. Great question. But if it's a shared album, once you create a shared album, you go into photos. Actually, let me make this shared album, and it's really quick. I'll make this shared album. Yeah, it's not my system library. I have to be, let's go into my other one. I'll show you how to do this. Let me quit photos, and I'll fire up photos in my real album. And so if I go here to a shared album, let's say here was our ski club party. Once I've created the shared album, I go up here and hit this little information sign up here. And I first of all make it public. And when I make it public, I now get a link. And anybody, Android, PC, Mac, Linux, whatever they got, they can use this link and view this shared album. And I also say subscribers can post. So you can invite people to it, or you can just email this shared album, but you have to turn on public website once you've done it. That means that this stuff is all public. So I was able to send this link out in a newsletter to our ski club, and they were able to all get these photos of our party that we had.
Thank you.
That answers it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Yost.
Can you alter the time for each picture in a slideshow? Or are they all
Not each picture, unless you go into iMovie.
I see. So you got to go into another program to do,
Right.
application.
Right.
Okay.
And you can go like in the Ken. So what you can do and it's a great question. So what you do in the in movie in the Ken Burns effect is where it goes in and it's like a drone coming in and goes out and stuff. This is made, boom, one button, I'm done.
Yeah.
And slideshow length, one button, I'm done. But in iMovie, you can take the Ken Burns effect and you even tell it where to zoom in and how slow to go in and go out. And then also for the length of the slide, it's like building a slideshow in Keynote. You can adjust the length of each individual one in there. What I do generally is, to make it easy, if you want just a few slides to be a little different, I will go in and make the slideshow easily in photos the way I want it, keeping out those slides that I'm going to make special in iMovie, like an intro slide or things like that. And then I basically take that whole movie of the slideshow, I put it in iMovie, and then I do those 5 slides that I want to be special and adjust them independently. Because if you have a slideshow of 100, you can spend all day tweaking them and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And my saying that you have to live by is, don't let perfect be the evil of good. In other words, you have to look at this and see how long you have to do it. And if you get too frustrated with it, you'll never do it. And therefore, that's the evil of perfect. Good is better than perfect if perfect never gets out. So,
yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Keith, and then Kathy.
Can I add captions to any photo in a slideshow?
In iMovie, yes.
But not in slideshow.
Well, but you can't, it's not a caption as such. You can do markup and put title, you can put words on photos.
Okay.
If you're looking to do captions, you need to bring it into iMovie.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but you can put words on a photo, but that's a little different. I'm virtually certain you can't do it. Well, actually, I take that back. Let's go back to projects. Here's my projects. Here, MacNexus 30th. Let me look. Oh, that's not a slideshow though. Oh, my projects, there we go. Yosemite Keepers. Oh, extension missing, okay. here we go. Here's a bunch at the bottom. And that text is there. Let's see. I'm trying to see if I can add this caption that's there. No, I don't think so. Someone might know better than me because you have this one. I would think you could do it somehow, but I just don't see it.
I was thinking, like, you showed a picture of Mesa Arch in Utah in
Right.
one of the slides. Could you add a caption under that says Mesa Arch so everybody who looks at the picture knows immediately where it is or what it is?
You would have to do it when the photo's up here in something like this, and you'd have to do markup. And what's funny is I don't see markup in here anymore now, which is weird.
Okay.
Because markup is supposed to be, oh, there it is. So here's markup. It used to be down below the line. So, and you can do this on your phone. Oh, there's Gail. You can do this on your phone. If you hit markup, you can choose text and you can say, well, here, let's see, Gail. Oops. And then I can put this wherever I want on the photo. I can change the text, do whatever I want on this, and then it becomes part of that photo. And then when you put that photo into a slideshow, and by the way, this puts it on this photo everywhere, in every album it's in and everything. It's just like cropping or doing anything else. So you can, and this is where you go into, and I'm going to not edit that, but if you go up here to the ellipsis at the very top and come down to markup, and by the way, this is available on your phone also. So you click markup, and markup brings up this menu at the top where you can draw squiggly lines, you can put in different objects, you can write on text, you can add a speech bubble, let's say, kind of like I did on my goats thing. So I could make Gail being saying this or something like that. So that's markup. And then that becomes part of the photo. But the best part is you can always revert to original and delete that stuff off the photo.
Great. Good idea. Thank you.
Yeah. And that way it'll help with what you're trying to do.
Yep.
Kathy, go for it. And then Don.
I missed twice how you said to get rid of the text in the beginning of the project.
Sure. So let me go down to a project. Like here, and see this Iceland one?
Yep.
In the very first slide, it's got a T. Well, that did it. This one, that's actually a little different. Let's try, not Yosemite Keepers, travel present. So see slide number 1.
Yeah.
And you see the little black box in front of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I click that and
Uh-huh.
then you hit the delete key.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And it generates it automatically by the name of your album,
Mm-hmm.
and consequently the name of your project. And if you don't want it, that's how you delete it. But you can also go down there, and if you change the name on the left-hand side of your project, if you wanted it to be there, but just be a different name, and it only shows on the first slide.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
One other thing, if you share it with Android friends, and the word public makes me nervous, like then, or I don't know.
Well, then don't share it with them. That's the only way they can see it.
Okay.
But remember, it's a link on the cloud. There's no way anybody would ever find it. It's
okay.
It's not private, but it's so obscure nobody would find it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Don, go for it.
Got 2 questions, one on photos and one on AI. On photos, I frequently need to change the contrast in a gradient across a picture. Right now, I have a camera on a bird nest right out on the edge of my house, and one side is darker than the other side. And I want to change I don't know whether you'd call it the contrast or what, but I want to make the lighting look the same on either side.
You would need a a better photo program for that. So basically you need to do darkroom type tricks, right?
Right.
Yeah, that would require Luminar, Lightroom, Affinity, one of those, or actually, one of the great ones, and it's not expensive, Pixelmator or Pixelmator Pro.
Okay.
Completely forgot about that. That one's awesome.
Okay.
So you had a second question?
Yeah, I frequently do a lot of Googling for different things. Right now we have a cabin at Tahoe and the snow took some shingles off, and want to Google solutions to avoid snow from taking some shingles at the bottom of my roof off. I'm wondering if any of the AI things would do a better. When I Google like that, I get a whole bunch of things I'm not interested in. I'm wondering if any of the AI programs would improve searches.
So what you're trying to search to do what?
I have some shingles that have pulled off our house because of all the snow.
Right. Because of ice dams. Yeah.
There's several solutions. One is heating tape. One is just putting flashing at the bottom of the roof.
Yeah.
One is putting little triangle things on it.
So don't overthink it. Think back to itinerary and I drilled it down. So you would just go to ChatGPT is what is the best way to repair ice damage on asphalt shingles, and let it go. And then once you see the results, then further ask it questions to refine it. And I'll give you an example. There's a thing called SoundHound that you can use that it's been around for a while, but I could say, find available hotel rooms on such and such a date in South Lake Tahoe below $250 a night. And then it brings those up, and then say, that have a swimming pool. Then you can refine it and refine it and refine it. And that's the beauty of it, because you're still within this request and let it go farther and farther and farther down. So, and you never know. It's Google on steroids, but the other thing is, once you go on Google, they're gonna have videos on how to do things and all that other stuff. But Google and Bing are starting to implement it into their search. But remember, so much of what you do for search is immediate and timely for right then. And so ChatGPT wouldn't differentiate from that, because its data is a month old. So it may not be pertinent to everyone's search. So, and to be honest, it's kind of like Google search, you get, I found 336,000 results across 245 pages. Well, when you get far down that, it's kind of like, too much information is what can be bad. But it's also, that's what the computer is doing. And if you think about this, I mean, we're all concerned about the NSA and our phone calls and all that other stuff. Previously, to store all that information was huge, but to go through that information, think of the task of all these road signs that the artificial intelligence has gone through to figure out how to drive a car. Well, and we learned that a stop sign that might have a bent corner on it, you stop at it because we saw other cars stop at it. That's our processing. But they got enough of that data, they can do it. But now, where I used to say, you don't be concerned about all your data that's out there, because I used to say there was security in obscurity by being too large. If you have too much data, I used to give this example. If the Rose Bowl game was happening and you were in the Rose Bowl, it's very safe that you wouldn't get identified, because there's so many other people there. It'd be hard to point you out. So therefore, there's obscurity in being in a big group. But if you were at the Rose Bowl and you went into an elevator with 4 other people, it's pretty easy for you to be identified. And so my thought was, if I have a whole bunch of data out there and a whole bunch of other people have data, it made my data a little more safe. Well, now the problem is with AI and machine learning, it can sift through that data and look. It can be told to look for certain things, or you can tell it how to look for other things and it'll come up with it. So it's that processing of the data. And this isn't to scare you on that. It's just to say it's a pretty big deal. And it'd be the equivalent of, let's say the photo lineup, they're trying to find a suspect. Look back in the old East Area Rapist days. There were kind of pictures, there were kind of drawings and stuff. I mean, think about this, either a picture or a drawing of him, AI would have probably got and the MO that happened, how he did it, it would draw a pretty good conclusion and give you a lot more help in regarding who that might be. And so there's some good points to it, but it's ominous. Yeah. And it's here and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just like, I know a lot of people, they turn off on their phone location services. Location services are wonderful. When I take a photo, I use that to find out where I was on a trip, what time it was, my GPS location, all that, because they're concerned they're going to get tracked. Well, you know what? The cellular provider of your phone is the one that's going to give up where you were. You look at the Scott Peterson thing. He was followed to the pier in Berkeley by his cell phone towers. It wasn't that his phone was giving away his location because of apps. It was giving it away to the cell phone towers. And those can be disclosed on subpoena very easily. In fact, the cell phone carriers make a lot of money by subpoenas on getting that stuff. So don't be too afraid of it. Just realize the only alternative to that is just don't have your phone on or don't use a phone. And you know what? That's up to you. But don't be handcuffed by it. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace
Did you
it as much
insert
as you
yourself into this picture or were you there?
No, I was there. Yeah, that was
Okay.
that was there. I was lucky, and the valley was so cool. So,
Beautiful picture.
oh, thank you. It was I think somebody else held my camera and did it. It was
I thought I did it.
It was on, I think you did. Al was with me and Ken. I think Al took this one. Yeah. That was a great trip, wasn't it, Al?
Yeah, it was wonderful, man. I'll never forget it.
All right, Bev,
forget
go
it.
right ahead.
Yeah, I realize we're well over 12, but could you briefly go through how on
Thanks,
markup
Al, I got your hint.
add text?
on the time. Go ahead.
Could you briefly go through and add the text, like a text box in markup? I have a photo pulled up and I've been playing with it and I can't seem to get a nice little.
Did you click edit?
Yes, I got edit. I've gotten the markup.
Okay, let me get into a photo.
I did the ellipsis and got the markup and I have the menus, but then I
okay,
get.
there's a little box with letters in it.
Oh.
Here we go. I'll pull up this one and I click edit.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to import it because it was in the cloud. The ellipsis, and I go to markup. And then in this little menu, do you see the big A, the letter A?
Yes.
If you click that, it creates a text box. You can see vaguely in my thing here. I will make it bigger. I go to A and I'm going to make it bigger here. Now it's 100 points.
Okay.
And now I can move it around and change the color.
Perfect. I got doodles and all these other thingies, but
yeah, it's the A with the box.
Okay.
And then to adjust it, you have to go over to the right where the big A, small a is. There's a pull down, and that's your fonts, and you're centering the font and everything else. And it does now. It didn't used to, but it does your entire font library. And by the way, markup is available on the iPhone and the iPad.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. Don, go for it.
Yeah, I was trying to download Chat GPT and I downloaded what I think is it's called AI.
You don't need to download anything. You can go into the browser and just do chat.openai.io, I think.
Oh, okay. But downloaded something called AI Chat Box. I don't know what that is.
Well, let's I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I'm not sure.
But it's chat.openai.com.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And there's no need to download. Some places will make you register and it's okay. I mean, you're not, and you can use, with the Apple thing, you can use a different email. So
Another quick one. I was trying to find a date and a photo that I took from the metadata, and I ended up, I think maybe preview or something. I had to open it in. Where do you get the access?
Well, if I'm in photos and let me get out of this, I'm going to hit cancel. On the photo, there's a little information or command get info, brings up your photo. And what you'll notice here is, so this was taken with an iPhone 13 Pro Max. It gives you the stat. This is called metadata. And it actually shows you what the ISO and the zoom and everything was. It shows you, this is why you want location. This is the location on a map in Morocco where I was.
Yeah.
I could add faces to it. This is all the information about it, the date and the time.
Oh, I must have just skipped the date and the times up at the top. Okay.
If you and you may have a photo of them and copied or something. By the way, you can correct this. Let's say it's a scan. You would, the scan, if it's a photo from 1965, but you scanned it in 1999, you could change the date because the date will reflect the scan. But this metadata is great. And there's more. There's an app on the iPhone you can get that I think Bob told me about a long time ago. It's called View EXIF, because this is called XF data, and it actually has more data than what's here. So again, I encourage you to make sure you have location on. And if you shoot with a regular camera, always take at least one iPhone shot everywhere you are so that it timestamps it correctly. So you don't have to reset the time on the camera all the time. And so you have a map of where it was. Because you go on, you might be in 5 different cities over a 2-week period and they all look the same. So, and that's the Command I for get info, or you can go up here and say, get info. It's hidden, but it's Command. Oh, there it is. Window, Command I for get info, or hit this little I right up here. And then as you go through your photos, I can go left and right through my photos and see it. Look, it's even following my location there. I'm in this garden by the hotel we were in, and that little pin is moving. That's how accurate it is.
Wow.
I put a link in the for the View XF app for your phone.
Perfect.
It's pretty good app. I have it.
Yeah. I think it was Bob turned me on to it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And we'll, if everybody's okay, we'll start the board meeting right at 1 still. So.
Sounds good.
Enough. Oh, look at these peacocks. They were at the hotel there. Anyway, thanks everybody. Have a great one.
Thank
and
you.
Stop. Oh,
Safe
Al,
travels.
I'll stop the recording and you might want